Welcome to Legacy Conversations, a channel where we preserve military memories and history.
Hello everyone, it's Chris here. Welcome to Legacy. We're grateful for your time, like always. This is going to be a very long video, but it's worth it. I don't want to break it up into several episodes because it's about one battle which took place, and it didn't take place over many days or anything like that. And it's called Savate. Now, we made videos about the Battle of Savate before. At least where 3-2 Battalion in 1980 suffered their most losses, which they've ever suffered. After that, I believe, came Ops Forte, and we are trying to make a video on Ops Forte as well. I don't know when that's going to happen, but it's important for the military history, and it's important for the monitor to speak. So if there's any survivors here listening here of Ops Forte, please let us get that video done. It's very important. I also feel that at Legacy these days we have another function here. And one of the functions we have would be to teach people to, not to just tell the stories, but to explain to people where we come from, because there's a lot of people who don't know. And they don't know because of the history books, you know, it's been changed. But I can think of several battles, names, which has played a major role in the history of South Africa's military. And the first one I want to mention is the Battle of Blood River. In Afrikaans, you will call that Bloedrivier. And I think it took place in 1838. It was against the Zulu nation. And it was by the grace of God and a miracle that they won there. And since that day, there's an oath and thankfulness. Every 16th of December, the Afrikaner nation would get together and they would thank God for what happened on that day. Sadly, through the years, you know, the decades and the years which passed, a lot of the people turned their backs. That's their problem, not mine. We're not here to preach. But 16 December really means a lot for us. And then I can mention another name which is also fascinating. It is the Battle of Magersfontein, which happened during the Second Anglo-Boer War. And that's the first time, according to the South Africans anyway, where trenches were used in modern warfare, and they shot the hell out of the British Army. So that happened at the Battle of Magersfontein. Very, very interesting, fascinating. You can visit these sites as well. It's possible. A few years later, then came the Battle of Delville Wood. Now, man, I can tell you, when I say the Battle of Delville Wood, I get shivers, because unless you've seen those thousands of graves in the cemeteries in France for the First World War, you cannot understand the Delville Wood. Basically, the South Africans, they stopped the German army, and they kept the line, but they lost, I think, about 90% of their people. But they kept that line, and they kept on fighting, and there was nothing left of the wood. You know, a forest called Delville. Nothing. I mean, this thing was just shot to pieces. Tremendous fight which was going on there. And then in the Second World War, there was Tobruk. Now, Tobruk was a little bit different because the South Africans actually surrendered there. Or let me rather say they were surrendered by their officers. And Tobruk at that stage was not the same as it was the year before, when the Australian Rats of Tobruk and other units, a lot of units besides the Australians there, was holding it. They actually held it against Rommel, which they did very well. Take our hats off to our horses. And the second round, the second battle, sadly, the defense structures were totally depleted. And also what happened is the British armour moved all the way back to Egypt. They basically left the South Africans there. And then after due consultations and whatever, they surrendered. They ended up in Italy as prisoners of war. Some of them escaped and then came back, and they were not impressed with their commanders. But that all of these things is a story for another day. In our time, in our time. I think the Battle of Savate is the one which stands out. There are many more, as I said, Oxford as well. But these things are linked to 32 Battalion. 32 Battalion, that marvelous unit which came to an end because of betrayal. And as I said, I think, yes, we made other episodes before, and we will definitely make other episodes about Savate again, because there's going to be something very special in 2024 about Savate. So let's carry on, and let me say thank you to all the men who contributed here. I want to thank Fossie and his wife for the editing. Guys, just enjoy the video. Just enjoy the video, spread the word.
Battle of Savate, 21st of May 1980, 32 Battalion. The Battle of Savate was fought on the 21st of May 1980 on the banks of the Kavango River, 100 kilometers into southeast Angola. In a clandestine mission, 32 Battalion attacked and defeated an Angolan Army unit on behalf of the UNITA guerrilla movement. One of the best anti-guerrilla units in the world at the time, 32 Battalion was made up of black Portuguese-speaking Angolans and South African white officers and NCOs. Savate was estimated to be defended by approximately 200 Angolan Army troops. 32 Battalion, under the guise of UNITA, attacked with a force of 350 men. Unbeknown to the attackers, there were approximately 1,300 Angolan army troops defending Savate at the time of the attack. The Angolans had been given advanced warning of the pending attack and had prepared their defences. With 15 men killed in the assault and nearly 40 wounded, 32 Battalion drove the Angolan force from Savate. Radio intercepts after the battle put the Angolan losses at 530 killed, wounded and missing. 32 Battalion's casualties at Savate were the highest ever suffered by the battalion. These interviews were recorded during 32 Battalion's Recce Wing reunion on a farm outside Upington, South Africa, 2023.
My name is Stefan Bauer. I was a doctor seconded to 32 Battalion in 1980 and served with them for about 3 to 4 months. And as part of that, during that time, I became involved as doctor for the Savate operations. And I was one of the 2 doctors that acted in the field during the operation. Initially, the operations for Savate started about 2 weeks before the actual operation. When I was the doctor at Omahoni, which was the Recce base, I was notified to go to Rundu by Falcon. That was the code name for our Colonel Dion Ferreira, who was the OC of 32 Battalion. And he called me in and he notified me that I was to go with Sergeant Major Ike Ukerman, who was the RSM at Rundu at the time. RSM is Regimental Sergeant Major. We were to go and collect equipment for the operation. When he called me in, he told me that there's going to be a big operation. I'm not allowed to know what it is. He's going to give me a list of what I must go and get at Grootfontein. When I pitch up at the Grootfontein, the guy is not going to give it to me. And he then said to me, I'm going to give you a piece of paper with a number on, no names. You tell the guy then to phone this number if he doesn't want to give it to you. So we did it. It's a day trip to Grootfontein, the Sergeant Major and myself and the Landy. Came there late at night. The next morning went into the stoorkamers there with all the stuff was held with the list. Sat in front of the guy, gave him the list, and he said, what is this for? And I said, mag jy sê nie. So he says, I'm not going to give you these things at all. So, I'm not entitled to it if I don't know what it is. So as the Falcon said, I gave him the list and I said, you must phone this number. He was a major. He took the number, started dialing, and listened on the other side, and who we were speaking to was obviously Falcon, being more and more quiet, saying, yes, Colonel, put the phone down, and he told me to come with me. We then got all a small little anesthetic machine, emergency equipment, which we were to fill a little the hospital ward that we did at Umawini. It was built just before this happened, a little sunken hospital, and loaded all that stuff into the galley and then went back to Rundu. And not knowing what it was, we set up that, stocked up that little room, and a tent which was going to be used as a little ward on this long tent for the wounded in Umawini as well.
Ek is Piet van Eden. Ek was deel van die verkenningsspan wat betrokke was by Savate. Was myself, Willem Ratte, 'n Unita gids, Jou en Burmeister. Ons was afgelaai met 'n chopper op die kaplyn waar ons die verlopes wat by HSI gewerk het. Hy het ons ingevat tot by ons plek wat veronderstel was om ons plek te wees. Hy het ons verkeerd afgelaai. Ons het begin oosloop na die rivier toe, ek en Willem en die res van die span. Ons het toe agtergekom dat ons baie verder afgelaai was as wat ons aanvanklik gedink het. Ons het die nag geloop en ons het nie die plek gekry nie. Die volgende dag het ons verder gestap. Ons het begin hoor, daar was aktiwiteit noord van ons. Willem het gedink ons is te na aan die basis of aan 'n ander basis afgelaai. Ons het bietjie meer suid gegaan en toe weer verder wes. Ons het toe die volgende dag ongeveer 1:30 by die rivier uitgekom. Ons het in die kleppers geklim. Ons het afgeroei suid wat ons moes gedoen het. Ons het toe by 'n basis uitgekom waar die Unita gids vir ons gesê dit behoort die plek te wees. Toe ons uitklim met Willem, kyk na die runway wat daarop was, toe sê ons is op die verkeerde basis. Die Unita ou het toe die basis herken en gesê dit is 'n Pande basis. Ons is verder toe weer noord geroei. Intussentyd is ons klepper al onder die water gewees. Ons het ons groot radio verloor en ons noord toe geroei. Ons het toe die seker omtrent op weer 2-3 die oggend eers by Savate uitgekom. En toe ons daar stop het Willem gesê ek moet uitklim en net kyk of ek iets kan sien daar. Ons het hulle baie gehoor daar. Ek het met die nagsig gekyk, toe sê ek dit lyk soos Johannesburg se ligte. En ons is toe terug net so 100 meter suid in digte rietbos. Daar Burmeister by die kleppers gebly. Willem en Paulo is op die runway uit waar hy die 14.5 gaan merk het. En ek is suid na die mortierstellings toe. En ek het toe nader aan daar gesit, ek en die Unita gids. Dit het toe begin lig word en die voertuie het begin by ons verbykom. En ek het toe vir Willem laat weet, ek kan nie langer daar bly nie, hulle gaan ons sien want dit was afgebrand. En ek en die Unita gids is toe af na die kleppers toe, waarvan ek en Willem en die res van die span oor kan die rivier gegaan het en in 'n boom geklim het. En van daar af het ons begin vuurleiding gee vir die mortiere.
My name is Justin Taylor. I was the signals officer for 3-2 Battalion duration of 1980. And just thinking back, my involvement in Savate actually started almost a month before it happened. I was in attack HQ at a base called in Congo, and Dion Ferreira, the officer commanding, said to me I needed to accompany him on a helicopter back to Rundu because there was a big operation coming up that needed to be planned. So that was a nice thing, by the way, being signals officer with Ferreiras that are trooped around in the choppers as opposed to the quaffles with the other guys in the dust. Anyway, get back to Rundu, and then I started noticing a lot of activity in and out of the HQ. And very interestingly, there were 2 or 3 high-ranking UNITA guys that were coming in and going to the intelligence section together with Chiefs of Intelligence Officers, CSI. And at that stage, you know, it's need to know basis. We had no idea what was being planned other than this was something really intriguing and it looked like it was going to be quite a big show. And then, yeah, halfway through that sort of period, Ferreira called me in as he did before every op, and he briefed me so that I could come up with the signals orders and all the radio nets. And he, if I remember correctly, the briefing was that we were going to attack right about 350 men, and that consisted of 3 infantry companies, mortar company, reconnaissance, stopper groups to the north, and a reconnaissance with Willem and Piet before. And then obviously we had to have ground-to-air comms with the Air Force, which is very much backup, and the medical facility behind us. So it was quite a complex radio net, or series of radio nets that I had to set up. And once I presented those, a couple of changes that he requested, and then those were included in his top secret orders that he presented, had to do the signals presentation as well at Omani. And I was sent to Omani together with Ix, the Ikuman, the Sergeant Major. I can't remember how we got there, by air or by road, but about a week before we were sent to Omani as a forward group to get things ready. And just looking back, we were expecting the 350 of us up against about 300 FAPLA, which is Angolan Army troops, remembering South Africa wasn't at war with the Angolan Army, so it's a clandestine operation, and we were making out that we were UNITA. And that's why with the planning, there was no air support, no artillery, no armour. We had to, in the attack, and the whole thing was set up to look like a classic UNITA attack, lining up 3 meters apart and attacking. But none of us had any inkling what was waiting for us. We were expecting 300 odd FAPLA, but as you'll see as the story comes out or unfolds, it was a very different picture.
Okay, my name is Johan Anderson. I was part of 3-2 Battalion that attacked Savate. I was with the Mortar section. We knew something big was coming up when the 3 companies and the Mortar group got their moving orders. Everybody had to move to O'Mahony. So O'Mahony is about 300 to 400 k's west of Buffalo, with Rindo in the middle. At Buffalo, we prepared all the mortar bombs by scratching off the R1 M1 sign saying that it was South African made, and so that it did look like a classic UNITA attack that was going to happen. At that stage, we didn't know what the target was and what the movement or the date of attack was going to be. We just moved to O'Mahony, where we all got our orders, and we had to. We knew from there what was going to happen.
My name is Sam Heap. I went to 3-2 Battalion in 1979. I was there for 3 years till the end of 81. I was fortunate to be part and parcel of Operation Tiro-Tiro, which was the attack on Savate. I was the company commander of Charlie Company at that stage, and we were at Buffalo when we heard that we had to prepare our normal attacking drills, where we went out to the training area. The companies that were involved for the preparations of the training was Alpha Company, it was Charlie Company, Foxtrot and Echo. We left Buffalo to go to O'Mahony. We didn't know what the operation entailed, and we were at O'Mahony for about 2 days, and then the whole force was gathered in the mess at O'Mahony, where Falcon, Colonel Dion Ferreira, gave the orders for the whole group as a well, we were all received orders as a whole group. We drove in on Quairfools, which is a Magirus truck, and there were also buffels that went along. I think that the command group, consisting of Colonel Ferreira and the RSM, the signalers, they were on the buffels. The rest of us were all on quays. It's only at the order group at Mahoney that we learned about what we were going to do. Although we had prepared for a clandestine operation, as we were told when we were in Buffalo that we had to wear clothing that had no resemblance to South Africa, there we came to the conclusion that it was something to do with UNITA. Part and parcel of what we got from the orders when we were at Mahoney is that we were told then that we are conducting this operation, the attack on FAPLA base at Savate, in order for UNITA to come in and take it over, and then we would come back to Namibia, and they would continue as if they had attacked the base and taken it over. As I said, we moved in with Quairfools, and the same person that took in the reconnaissance group of Willem and Piet, that Senior Lopez, Senor Lopez, he was also our guide towards the place where we were going to move from, or the assembly point. I talk under correction, but I think that the place where we had to go to was about 20 kilometers west of Savate. That is where we were going to debus and walk in from there. Senor Lopez also got lost, and we drove up and down the place, and we were looking for the correct place. Because we had no communication with, or couldn't get a Telstar on the air or be sure where we were, we had to rely on him at leaving us at the right place. But eventually we came to the conclusion that he didn't know where we were. So this whole force of us went up and down till we eventually got to the road that led from the place where we dismounted up to Savate. It was a very, very small dirt road that went to the east. We had already been late. As the original plan was to have a first light attack on the base. But we had to dismount. We got into our formation that we were going to walk, and the whole attack group formed up into two single files next to each other on this dirt road. Charlie Company and Alpha Company would lead at the front. I think then were the headquarters, and behind them it was Foxtrot and Echo Company. That night, when we started walking in, it was very, very dark. There was no moon, and we really had a problem in navigating this two-spur road. At times we really had to walk about a meter apart, touching each other, so that we could just follow the route and not veer off the route. I can't recall the precise time, but at a stage we heard a vehicle approaching from the eastern side towards where we were walking towards Savate. And we could hear that the vehicle was, or a vehicle or vehicles were coming closer and closer. We reported it back to the headquarters, and we were all instructed to get off the road on the northern side, all of us on the northern side of the road, and that we had to let the vehicles or vehicle come past, but we had to report in what we saw when they came past us. It was only a single vehicle, almost a vehicle that had sails on. It looked like a troop carrier. How many people were in the back, I'm not sure. It was late at night, they couldn't be seen, but there was someone was driving it, and they came past us, and we let Falcon know that there's only one vehicle. Well, initially we were told that we must not ambush the vehicle there at the beginning. They would do it at the center of the formation. The vehicle passed us, and the vehicle had lights on. You could see the dust hanging in the air where we had been walking, and I was very worried that these people would come to the conclusion that there's something in this road. But all right, it was late at night and they went past us. I can remember then that the ambush was sprung. There was a lot of fire going on. I'm not sure who was involved with it, whether it was a gym or the headquarters or which part of the formation, but there was a lot of firing going on, and we waited for further orders to carry on with the operation. Later on, Falcon came on the air, and he explained to us that we should continue, and we were then told, our thoughts then was that nobody had been captured or nobody had been shot there, but in any case that wasn't important. The main big problem now was that I think everybody was worried that our operation was compromised because of the ambush that was sprung there and all the firing. Nevertheless, we formed up again and we carried on. I can remember that there was a stage where we walked into a very, very dense area. It was dark, there was no moon, but then we walked into this bush, or this thick area. And as I said, Ati was in front of me, Ati Rustov, and we saw this dark object in front of us, and the whole formation was stopped. And we had a look at this, and my first thoughts, it was an elephant here in the road, but in this bush, this elephant standing there, but it was quiet and it wasn't moving. Okay, I did report it, and then I was instructed, Falcon instructed me to go investigate or have a look what it is that we saw there. All right, we went closer, and it was a vehicle, a static vehicle. I had a bit of training in demolitions, so my first thought was this vehicle was a booby trap that was put there because of the other vehicle that was shot out earlier. In any case, I opened the door, I felt for any tripwires and things like that. Okay, then I came to the conclusion it's just empty, there's no one there. I reported it, and we were told to continue. We continued with the walking in until we got to the dispersal point where we were going to go in different directions. At the dispersal point is the place where every one of us that carried a 81mm mortar bomb, we had to put it down there so that the mortar platoon and the two platoons from Echo that was their protection, they would pick it up and move in to their the point where they're going to form up for the operation. As from there, I had to walk on a certain bearing to go to my former position, where I had 2 platoons that were going to go with me. That was going to be on the northern side of the runway, and the direction of attack would have been from the west to the east. My target, as we understood it from the orders, was a vehicle park, or a logistical area where there were a lot of vehicles. So it wasn't a very serious or a big threat area. So that's why I only had 2 platoons with myself. My 3rd platoon, Charlie 9, was the reserve for the main attacking force of Alpha Company and Foxtrot Company. They would be in depth behind the headquarters, and they would be utilized as the reserve. As I said, I had to walk on a compass bearing to my place. I veered off and I went and I took my 2 platoons with me, but I think I might have walked maybe for about 20 to 30 minutes, and I reported to Falcon that there's no way that we can go on a bearing, because the area was very dense and it was hakkensteek. I mean, when you normally do night walks, you know, you'd venture around the bush on the left hand side, and then the next time around the right hand side in the right direction. But that was impossible. It's just really, we were bundu bashing, and the people we were ripped with the thorns and the things. And I asked Falcon if we could rather stop and wait for first light, so that we could see where we are walking. We couldn't see the, because of the brush and everything, it was impossible to carry on. Okay, he confirmed it was right. An incident that then took place, we were very glad that we could wait till first light. Ati Rustov had a ground sheet. It was cold because we didn't have any other things. We just had our first line ammunition that we were carrying and our weapons. So there was no sleeping bags or anything. So luckily Ati had a ground sheet, and we went and lay down. There was 3 of us lying there. I was in the middle, and it was cold. Really, it was getting very cold. As I said, I was in the middle. I was lucky, and I could feel the 2 guys on the side pulling the ground sheet over to their side. So, yes, first light, when it just started coming light, Falcon told us then, all right, get your kit and continue. As I said, I had to form out up on the northern part of the runway. I took my 2 platoons, and we went to our former place, and there we went down and we waited for the pre-bombardment of the mortars to take place before we would carry on with our attack.
Yeah, I just want to go back to before the convoy left Damani. As Piet mentioned, that he and Willem had gone in with their reconnaissance, and there was another reconnaissance team that had gone in before you guys, if I remember correctly, and they got lost, and I can't remember who that was. But the significance of this is that in the morning and the evening, they had to report back, sit reps, and I think the first one came through on the HF radio. No, so everyone, the whole attacking forces in Amadi, just the reconnaissance force out there. I think it was the second or third one that they missed, and they didn't check in. And the issue for me is that I didn't pick that up. My responsibility, so that by the time the second one was missed, I suddenly realized what was going on. So with a lot of trepidation, I went to go and own up to Ferreira, thinking that these guys had been captured or whatever. And that's where we had to send up the Telstar that we were using. It was a Cessna 185, and it went up and made VHF comms with Willem and Piet. And the big thing there already, that was just to communicate with them, was the chance that would compromise the surprise of the attack. We were hoping that the aircraft flew far south enough not to compromise. And then Sam mentioned the convoy getting lost going in, and unbeknownst to us, the comms failure with Piet and Willem at the time, my responsibility. Ferreira, the OC, is looking at me, why is it going wrong already? Unbeknown to us, their radio got wet, dumped in the water, the big HF radio. So going into the convoy was getting lost. I remember the tension and pressure in the HQ buffel was up at boiling point. So again, we hopped out, put up the HF radio, communicated back to Moni, requested the spotter plane, the Cessna 182 again. Again, the big risk and debate was the fact that it was up there to tell us where we were and which way to go. We ran the risk of compromising the whole operation. That's the second comms failure. Was Ferreira was trying to, on the A-72 ground to air, was trying to contact the gun in the aircraft above us. We could see it, hear it, and he called Telstar 0 Alpha again and again, nothing. Of course, he looks at me, and I can see that look in his eye, and eventually he got so frustrated he threw the handset, which has got that curvy thing, at me and straight in my face. And luckily it stopped about here before it bounced back. But I jumped off the buffel, tested his radio, my radio, it was working. The Cessna went back to Modi, and 1 hour later it came back. And this time, Ferreira's same radio could talk, and it was, the problem had been the radio in the aircraft. So we'd already had 2 issues with comms. And then Sam's mentioned the walk through the forest. I don't know if the Mortar guys want to take up from here. And Piet again, because Piet had to lead the Mortar guys into position before the last light. And again, there was a comms failure there with VHF. They couldn't talk to each other, but I think they can tell that story.
My name is Kevin Fitzgerald. I was a sergeant in 3 Battalion Reconnaissance Group from 1978 to 1981. Our involvement with Operation Tiro-Tiro, the attack on the town and MPLA base located at Savate, began when Willem returned from his briefing by Falcon and the CSI, which was Chief Staff Intelligence, who were the component of the South African Defence Force that was involved with UNITA. We were tasked to provide stopper groups for the attack that went in, so we were based to the north of Savate, and we had 10 stopper groups of 3 men each. The expectation was that they expected a component of approximately 350 men to be present at the base at Savate, and I believe we were attacking with a component of about 300 personnel from 3 Battalion. The base was a very substantial base. It was well entrenched, had been there for a long time, and the purpose of this attack had strategic value in that if we were successful in that attack and UNITA could move in, it would effectively curtail the expansion of the MPLA along the western border of the Kavango River down south to the northern border of Namibia. Until that point, that area of Namibia had been relatively free of any SWAPO activity, any MPLA activity, because it was really a remote area of Angola. But with the MPLA encroaching further and further south year upon year, the fear was that SWAPO would begin to get a presence there, and that ultimately we wanted to prevent that. So this plan was derived in part to prevent that possibility, as well as to entrench UNITA to the west of the Kavanga River as a bulwark against the MPLA, and keep that area relatively free of any kind of activity by our adversaries, which suited us because our camp was just south of that area, as were one or two other minor camps, and that area had been peaceful for a long, long time, and it was important that we kept it that way. Our preparations then began. Teams were divided up. Normal teams consisted of 5 people, but for this particular operation we were broken down into groups of 3. My group consisted of Peter Lipman and Alberto. Together with the other groups, we were then put onto the convoy and departed for Savate. Now, I do not believe that any of us could comprehend what lay ahead of us. It seemed like a relatively simple operation. We didn't anticipate any major problems. But as you heard from the previous interviewees on here, that things went somewhat wrong almost from the outset. Senor Lopez, who I believe was a hunter in that area in years gone by, clearly did not know the area as well as he professed to know it. So a lot of time was wasted on the initial reconnaissance, crucial time. The Klepper that they refer to, which is a very efficient special forces type Klepper, you can dismantle it, you can carry it, was lost, and the equipment on it damaged because we ran into rapids that were never anticipated in the initial planning. And the main radio, which I think was called the B-52, was lost. That caused immense problems for us. Problems which, if they'd been revealed timelessly, may have resulted in an entirely different operational approach. And the reason that I state that is that Willem had discovered in his observation of Savate that Savate actually had 2 elements of the MPLA in it. One was a relief element and the other one was the outgoing element. And this had not been revealed, as far as we are aware, in any of the intelligence, that there was a possibility that the MPLA would be changing its garrison component. So instead of us facing approximately 300 people, we were fighting, I believe, close to 900. That changes the equation dramatically. You're coming up to an entrenched, fortified position that's been there for a long time, that is double the man count component that it had, expected to have and ever had at any other point, requires a different plan. Unfortunately, for the reasons that Justin has given, we were not able to establish comms with Willem until it was literally too late. So the attack went ahead. The Recce group component at the dispersal point that Sam had spoken about moved up north. We then headed east and set ourselves up from the road that Sam referred to that ran north-south, almost parallel to the Kavanga River, to the river itself. The 10 stopper groups were dotted along that road. A component of the Recce that has not really been touched on so far by the previous interviewers was that group under Lieutenant Opperman were tasked to go reconnoiter an area for them to set up an ambush, a vehicle ambush, for a base that was located north of Savate that would reasonably send troops to come and support the Savate garrison that was under attack. The whole deception was that we had opposed ourselves as UNITA. I suppose if the MPLA knew it was a South African attack, they wouldn't have been so eager to send reinforcements from the north. But seeing that we were presenting ourselves as UNITA, the expectation was that we could expect reinforcements to be sent to the north. So Opi's team was sent in to reconnoiter a suitable area for them to set an ambush up. But as both teams were dropped in the wrong place, a lot of time was lost. Critical time was lost. Opi's team was so badly hydrated that they actually had to be picked up, flown to Amoni and put on drips to rehydrate them. They were then put onto the convoy that was departing almost immediately. So they had undergone a lot of physical stress. When we got there, as I said, we departed from the dispersal point, walked up north. Oppies worked a bit further than we were. We had to turn at a Pacific T-junction, and that road ran east to west. And Oppies went a bit further up from that. They laid mines, and they went into the ambush position. We continued, and we were the second, myself and Peter, who is going to follow me in this interview, were the second group down from the Kavanga River. The first group was Zach Garrett, then myself, and then all the other remaining 8 groups were scattered from that point along to the road. You know, I must emphasize, and I want the viewers to appreciate, that what we achieved, subsequently achieved at Savate was beyond expectation. The Savate operation catapulted C2 Battalion into the framework of the higher commands at SADF headquarters in Pretoria. What the unit did in that operation, I do not believe any other unit could achieve. We had absolutely no support. As Justin Taylor has mentioned, we weren't allowed to have air support. We weren't allowed to have armoured support or any other kind of support. We were denied all of that, which included Casevac support. And for us to have emerged victorious under those circumstances, with everything that went wrong in the early stages, was absolutely a remarkable achievement by the members of that unit and the people that fought that day. The operations at C2 and the way that C2 was deployed after that changed dramatically. The perception of C2 by the top brass changed dramatically. And C2 from that point was really used very tactically and very strategically, and went on to build themselves into the most formidable fighting unit in the history of the SADF. And that is saying something. We had fought in both world wars, we had fought in the Korean War. Yet C2 Battalion emerged from a local war, a low intensity war, as they might call it, but it was anything but low intensity to us, as the foremost fighting unit, foremost combat unit of the SADF. And that was because of Savate. And that is why Savate is such a significant battle, both for the SADF and particularly for C2 Battalion. The attack started late because of all of the delays that you are now aware of, and they were waiting for us. Obviously, the incident of the vehicle had alerted them. Possibly other factors that come into play that made them very vigilant to the fact that they were going to come under attack. So the bombardment, the mortar bombardment, started late. So it was full light by then. I can't remember the time, I think it was at 9 o'clock.
Our movement through the bush was done, and we arrived at a dispersal point where the companies left the mortar bombs for us. The 2 platoons of Echo Company assisted the mortar group with carrying the bombs. Each person from the companies carried one 81mm bomb. Mortar guys had to carry base plates, the mortar pipes, and the 2 foot of fate. plus the mortar bombs, and from the dispersal point they had 2 extra mortar bombs as well to carry. The mortar group consisted of mostly ex-wounded company guys that was getting better, so they weren't used to carrying so much at that stage. So we really battled to keep up with the movement. It was so dark that we had to hold on to each other and touching each other so that we don't get lost. But some of the guys, as they were tiring, couldn't keep up, so it was a concertina effect all the time. Our movement was really slow. Even Echo Company also battled with all the mortar bombs. We got to where we were supposed to meet the reconnaissance guy that was to show us where the mortar position were. We couldn't meet up at all, so we had to make do with our own position. We walked to the edge of the Shana. We thought we were set up just on the bush line, and we marked. We started making our calculations on the bombardment. Echo Company, Billy Fall and Russell Organ went forward to the road where they planted some mines because we thought there might be coming some vehicles. We arrived at the mortar position about 8:45. We set up base plates and everything, and unfortunately we started late because of all the problems with the movement, the darkness and so on. Our first bombs, when we started the bombardment at 9 o'clock, the first bombs were very far off, but luckily the reconnaissance group, Willem and then were on top of a hill where they could where they had a very good view of the base, and they did the corrections for us. We carried on with the bombardment. It was only HE bombs that we threw, and once the pre-bombardment was done, the company guys got up and started with their attack. The amount of fire that we heard from where we were, we could hear that was definitely not just a normal, the guys that the enemy that we were supposed to meet over there. It was really quite heavy fire that came through, and then carried on, and then the radio messages came through of the wounded and the problems that they had. Some platoons were pinned down, and we knew the guys were in for a very serious scrap. There were 14.5s that Willem picked up, and some of the mortar pipes bombarded or tried to get to the 14.5s. 14.5 millimeter is a anti-aircraft gun that they used on a ground fire. So we carried on with the bombardment for quite long, and we could really hear that the companies were in trouble. At that stage, a convoy was coming from the south as well, and it was consisting of 3 gas vehicles with troops at the back. We ceased fire at that stage so that the convoy could pass. They didn't hit the landmines. I think they veered off to another track, and I think that is the attack on the HQ from behind lines that came from that convoy, and Justin will elaborate on the attack on them from behind. We carried on firing till about 2 o'clock, and then we were called into the. It did stop at about 2. We were called into where the rest of the company guys were, and from there on it was quite a eye-opener to see what the guys went through and the shock on all of their faces.
My naam is John Botha, ek was lid van 3-2 Battalion van 1978 af tot November 1981 en weer in 87 en 88. Ek was 'n sergeant, ek was 'n lid van 3-2 Battalion verkenningsvleuel. Met die aanval op Savate op Tiro-Tiro het ons ongeloop. Een ding wat ek net wil bysê op die beginning, nadat ons deur die bosse is en altyd die padde gegaan het, om en by die aand 12 uur het 'n voertuig van vooraf gekom met sy ligte aan. Op daai stadium omdat die bos so dig was, het ons reg langs die bos geloop in 'n 2-spoorpaadjie en 'n enkel gelid. Ek was omtrent die 2de of die 3de span van die voorste ouens al wat genavigeer het. Soos die voertuig gekom het, het ons die teken gegee om 'n voertuig van vooraf, almal het afgegaan in die regterkant van die pad en ons wil hê. Ons was bekommerd met die voertuig wat nader kom, hy gaan ons spore sien. En soos jy verder agtergaan in die lyn, is die hele verkenningsvleuel se ouens plus dis die 2 kompanies so die pad begin stop en goed opbou. So ons het doodstil gelê, die voertuig het afgekom en hy het gestop. Sy ligte was aan. Ongeveer 20, 25, 40 tree voor ons en hierdie ouens het hout bymekaar gemaak. Ons was baie bekommerd op daai stadium dat die operasie geblaas is en dat dit 'n lemon kan wees. 'n Lemon beteken dat jy 'n plek aanval en die ouens weet klaar en hulle dit onttrek. Die ouens het hout bymekaar gemaak. Ons het doodstil gelê, hulle weer teruggeklim in die voertuig. Was 'n baie koue aand. Hulle het in die voertuig gekom en verby ons gery, soos wat sê hom en die ander soos hy agtertoe af en hulle is later geambush. Ons het baie tyd verloor op daai stadium want ons het die hele ruk daar gelê en wag tot die opdrag gekom het ons kan weer aangaan by die mars. Ons kon nie vinniger begin stap nie want almal agter, dis nou ons die ouens agter wat eers na die mop-up van die ambush en almal moet weer gereed wees om te loop. En dit het 'n verdere vertraging in die aanmars veroorsaak. So ons het baie later weer begin stap. Die sand was baie dik en ons het stadiger gestap as wat ons normaalweg op stap. Jou probleem met stap in 'n enkelpoorspaadjie en die voorste ou stap maklik. Die tweede ou die grond los en hoe verder jy stap in die enkel gelid, hoe losser raak die grond. En hoe meer die ou stap in werklikheid agter al hoe moeiliker. En ons het gestap die hele nag, ons het 'n paar keer afgegaan, gerus, gestap, ingestap die oggend. Ek onthou duidelik die oggend met die aanval wat eerstelig sou plaasvind, het ons eerstelig gemis. Ons was nog ver van ons posisie af teen die tyd van eerstelig. Teen die tyd dat die bombardement gekom het, was ons besig om die basis te stap oor die pad in die rigting. My posisie wat ons moet aanneem in die 3-man span, ons was die 2de of die 3de span van die rivier af. Recce was heel eerste, ek dink dan Zek, en dan het ons span gelê. En my span was ek en Kevin Cyber en een ou se naam wat ek nie kan onthou nie, een van die swart ouens. En ek het reg langs die pad gelê met die opdrag dat hierdie pad het gesê ons moet alle verkeer stop wat inkom en ons moet baie verkeer stop wat uitgaan. Dit was op 'n tipe van Omaramba, daar was lang gras. So ons het tussen die gras gelê, daar was hier en daar bome, maar dit was baie oop. En die gras was reeds baie droog. Daar was so 'n muursoop, ek het langs die muursoop gaan lê om probeer 'n vorm van die muursoop te vorm om my pad te kan dop, maar ook vorentoe. En die bombardement eers het die inskiet gegaan en toe die bombardement gekom het, was ons plus minus almal in posisie. Die mortierbombardement het gegaan en daar het ons het bekommerd geraak want die bombardement het baie lank geduur met die aanval. Maar wat baie belangrik is wat die ander ouens nie gesê het nie, daar was 'n hengse of 'n helse geraas met die terugvuur. Die oomblik toe die mortiere begin skiet het hulle 2 monokashites gehad wat begin terugskiet het sporadies om net soek te skiet. En van die bomme het in ons rigting gekom, maar nie naby ons geval nie. Die area waar ons gelê het was baie hard. Die sand in die pad was los, maar op die Omaramba wat soos 'n vloedvlakte was baie hard. So die bomme wat geval het die skrapnel deur die gras gehardloop. So, ons het doodstil gelê en vir die eerste keer in my 3-2 loopbaan was ek bly om die verkenningsvleuel te wees, want die kompanies het 2 keer teruggegaan om ammunisie vol te maak, weer aangeval, veral die Echo en Foxtrot kompanie gedeelte. Toe daar 'n opdrag op die radio deurgekom, daar word 'n man vermis. Shaal, hulle het pertinent gesê, Shaal word vermis, en ons moet alle verkeer wat uit die basis uitkom moet gestop word, en ons het skielik besef, maar hier's nou, of ek spesifiek dan, ek en Kevin, hier's 'n groot probleem. En om en by hier so in die agtermiddag het ek teen die muursoop gesit en nou het ek vir Kevin wat langs my lê gesê, wat gaan aan? Eers en die skietery het begin kalmer word, baie kalmer. En sien ek 'n klomp voertuie en 'n klomp troepe wat in formasie voor die voertuie loop. En ek het dit gerapporteer, Kevin in die radio, Kevin was in daai situasie, my spanleier en elke radio, hy die radio hanteer, so hy het gerapporteer. En ek het baie bly geword, die geveg is oor, dis it's gone. En toe as ons my slaan, maar ons voertuie, die kwees waarmee ons ingekom het nie seile opgehad nie. En toe besef ons, dit is vyhandelike voertuie. Fritsie het teen daai rivier, kort rukkie later, het die kontak op die linkervleuel begin uitbreek. En Fritsie hulle was onder geweldige druk, want die ouens wat ontsnap het uit die basis, wat by die voertuie gekom het in formasie geloop, maar nader aan die rivier, van die rivier waar die bome was op die vloedvlakke. So ons het onmiddellik begin besef dat daar 'n probleem was, en ek het nou nie die radio gehad om te weet wie die opdrag gegee nie, maar ons het besluit om 'n flankaanval te loods, want daar baie vuur uitgebreek by Fritsie en Pierre Lipman op die kant en Space Monkey wat daar was, so laat ons hulle kan druk ontlig, en al die ouens het begin hardloop, van die kant af, en jy kon sien die formasie kom aan, soos hy stap, op die regterkant, almal die formasie het opgebreek, want die ouens hardloop uit spanne, party ouens hardloop vinniger as ander, en van die spanne, as jy afgaan met die lyn is nou verder terug, en ek kan duidelik onthou, dit was aanvanklik of hierdie ouens nie gesien het nie, en Swannies, klein Swannies het gehardloop rechts, ek kon hom duidelik in die hoek van my oog uit sien, en ek het nie nodig gehad om daai tyd te hardloop nie, want ek was die tweede of die derde span, maar hulle kom van ver af en hulle moes hardloop, en klein Swannie het sy AK opgetel, en hy het geskiet. Ek kan nie onthou wat die rede was en hoekom nie, maar toe hy daar skiet, toe slaat ons almal dek basies, toe begin hulle terugskiet, en toe begin ons kontak maak met die FAPLA's, en daar's baie meer as ons, en ons is geïsoleer, 3.
As dit nie was van Lops wat ons verkeerd afgegooi het, hy was veronderstel om ons 5 km noordwes van Savate af te gooi. Toe is heeltemal suid en omtrent 25 km wes afgegooi. Dit het ons so lank gevat om by ons plek te kom, en die groot probleem is met die koms, was ons B22 radio, was met die stroomversnelling, want ons was op daai stadium 3 ouens in die klepper gewees, en ons is onder die water gewees, en dit is hoekom ons radio toe nie meer koms gehad het met Justin hulle nie. En ons is toe af onder toe, soos ek gesê het, met die verkeerde plek eers verken, weer terug op ons plek, terug na ons observasieposisie toe in die boom, en van daar af kon ons toe eers die radio, toe het ons met Big Daddy toe met die spotter gewees, en ons kon toe met hom met die kleine radiokie in die hande kry, en ons het toe van daar af kon vuurleiding gee terug na die mortiere toe, want ek het suid gegaan, en toe 800 meter het ek 'n merk in die pad gemaak, en ons gewag vir die mortariste om in te kom, en hulle het nie in tyd kon kom nie, omdat hulle die pad so moeilik vir hulle was daarna toe. En hulle kon ook nie die spore kry, en ons moes toe onttrek af terug na ons plek toe.
Okay, the battle itself was supposed to start at dawn, but as has been mentioned, there were quite a few delays. Sam's guys got stuck in the Hackensteek trying to get around to the north. The Mortar guys, thick bush, carrying heavy loads. And there was also a breakdown in comms. Piet came across the river with another of the Recce guys to specifically guide the Mortar guys into their position. He wouldn't get comms on VHF for some reason. So the Mortar guys had to sort of find their own way. And the HQ element, very unusual. Normally the TAC HQ would sit in a static position, and the OC in charge would be in a tactical HQ with his maps and everything laid out. Commandant Ferreira opted to have a mobile TAC HQ going in just behind the assault groups. And in front of us, Sam with Charlie Company was off to the left at the other side of the north of the runway. About 300-400 meters ahead of us was Alpha and Foxtrot companies. I think we were more probably behind Alpha Company. And I can remember we were watching the sun come up, waiting for everybody to get in position, sort of clock ticking. And I remember Charlie Company walking past about 150 meters away. And I stood up and I waved, and 2 or 3 guys waved back. but I remember looking at these guys and thinking, yo, I wouldn't like to be the enemy today, because armed to the teeth, and you could see they knew what they were doing, but they filed past us. And the other memorable issue while we were waiting, two little guys, must be about 8 years old, 2 or 3 of them, came walking out from the base along this 2-track road where we were sitting on the one side, and the company guys were just the other side of that road. And that was reported by radio to Ferreira. And they asked what to do, and he said, look, if they turn around, bayonet them. If they carry on walking, leave them. And I was sitting a metre from the road in this tall grass, just my head sort of sticking through, and I remember putting my rifle down, pulling my bayonet out, and just saying over and over to these, in my mind, as it were, just don't turn around, don't turn. Luckily, these guys didn't turn around. They came beam me as well, and the one guy looked to the right and saw me 3 meters sitting in the grass, and his eyes just went like this. And then they very stiff walked past us, and then off they went up the road with their pink undersoles of their feet flashing. They were running so fast, their feet were flashing up to their shoulder blades almost as they disappeared. And then shortly after that, the mortar bombardment started, and I can't remember how long that went on for before Ferreira gave the command to advance. Alpha and Foxtrot companies stood up and advanced on the trenches. We couldn't see them from where we were, but it was 200-300 meters ahead. And we then started following on. We had a platoon, Lieutenant Trompi was the platoon commander protecting the HQ. In the HQ was Commandant Ferreira, Uckerman, Erasmus, Captain Erasmus, intelligence officer. Bruce Anders was the signaller, he was the ops clerk at Armour, but he was doubling as a signaller for me that day. And there was another ops clerk, I'll think of his name. So we started following in behind, and I'll never forget, someone mentioned the sound. I think Andy Anderson lying in the sand. I was the only one carrying the Sheila at that stage with all the radios and everything in it, lying there, thinking, how could I ever describe to anyone what this sounds like? I mean, there were a combination, as we discovered, nearly 1.5, maybe 2,000 semi-autos, automatics, and RPGs going off. It was just incredible sound. And then someone, and about that time I could hear bullets coming past us, but when they nearing the end of their trajectory, it's got sort of angry buzz like a bee, and so we got up and we started advancing, and it wasn't long before the bullets started that you could hear that deadly crack. You were within 100-200 meters, we suddenly came up out of the blue. Suddenly there were the trenches that didn't have any embankment in front of them, it was just these zigzag trenches, which was very clever. When we went over them, we didn't see anybody left in the trenches, and we went 40-50 meters into the base. Suddenly we got hit from behind, and whether that was guys who had hidden in the trenches, or whether, as Andy Anderson was saying, it was guys from that convoy that came up from the south. But everyone died flat. With the weight of the rucksack, I couldn't dive. I had to go on my knees and then go down. And at the time I thought I'd lost my balance, but I'm pretty sure that one of the oaks behind me had drawn a bead on me, and because probably worked out correctly, I had the radios and that. Because a bit later in the battle, a bullet went through the rucksack, missed my neck by that much, and that's what pushed me nose first into the sand. But anyway, I rolled over and took the Sheila off and shouted to Bruce Anders for him to take over the rucksack. He wasn't too happy because it's quite a hindrance when you have to fight in the battle or something like that on your back. And and then we went in. I got separated together with Recce Erasmus. Don't know how that happened. Don't know whether it was 5 minutes, half an hour, or whatever. But we were must have been quite funny seeing two HQ officers out of their depths spinning back to back shooting at everything that moved, and so we somehow stumbled back into the platoon, the HQ, and the platoon with it. And I remember Ferreira, the OC, it wasn't the fact that I was still alive or okay, he was just really angry that I'd been separated from him, because there were 3 vital VHF radios, and I was carrying one of them. Mine was the link to the reconnaissance guys. Ferreira had the radio strapped to each hip. One of them would have been the company commanders. The other one might have been Willem, and all ground to air. Yeah, so he had some very sharp words to say to me about the fact that I hadn't stuck with him. Something about potentially, I think so, my mother maybe was in a house of repute in Durban or something. So, but anyway, he had no idea how relieved I was to be back with the platoon. And it wasn't long after that Captain Recce was killed. And again, the comms issue was around about then. Ferreira couldn't get hold of one of his company commanders, which was Lieutenant Charles Muller. He was the adjutant, standing in as Alpha Company commander. And what we didn't know at the time was that he was already been killed. But he, with his command and control, that was the one link that he didn't have. So that was what, third or fourth comms issue we were having with the battle. And then soon after Erasmus was killed, the battle sort of died down where we were, and my standard procedure, every time we stopped for longer than 15 minutes, I put the HF radio up, get comms with Mahoney. So if Ferreira needed that link, it was there, up and running. When I turned the radio on, as I said, and when I pulled it up, I sort of had a bullet hole through it. So we lost our HF radio. And then the casualties started coming through. Tim Patrick's name came through as having been killed, and the other guys. From there, with midday, we started Alpha Company at Fort Down, almost running out of ammo. In fact, I think they had by the time they got to the village at the bottom. Foxtrot had also got down to the road, and luckily they swung. They didn't have it as hard as the Alpha Company, and they swung north and came up and helped Alpha Company in the nick of time. Jim Ross and of course Alpha Company were leaderless. They didn't know where Lieutenant Charles Muller was.
All right, as I say, we were formed up on the northern part of the runway, facing in an easterly direction, and we waited there for Falcon to give us the command to advance after the bombardment had begun at about 9 o'clock in the morning. That went on for about, I think, almost half an hour or so. Maybe it could be less, but then we were given the go-ahead. As soon as he gave the command to advance, we could hear the companies that were on the southern part of the runway. They were already in a scrap, and we could hear the firing, and it was really very intense. But myself and my 2 platoons, we stood up and we moved forward, going to look for this so-called vehicle park that we had to take over. We hadn't encountered the enemy or hadn't seen anything yet when we drew fire from the enemy. Automatic drills, we went down, and it was, telling the troops they were starting to buddy forward, but we couldn't see anything but the trees and the area next to us. It was being cut down by a high or big caliber weapons. We were not sure what it was, and maybe I think it could have been 30 to 50 meters after we have started drawing fire, then the reports came through from the platoon commanders that there were casualties already. And at that stage, we hadn't seen any enemy positions yet, or any moving targets or any enemy. We then realized that we were fighting against 14.5s that was being utilized in a ground role, and it wasn't a single gun that was covering in our direction. There was more than that. I am not sure, but I think because of the vehicle incident that happened earlier where there was an ambush, I think they expected an attack from the western side, and they could have repositioned some of the guns. Although there were 14.5 positions that were later found, I think they moved some of their guns to cover to the west. In any case, I didn't see myself advancing further because of the casualties that we've had already, and because of the high volume of fire that was coming from the vehicle park side. I requested permission to withdraw. But as I say, the firefight on the southern part of the airfield, the volumes was very high, and I couldn't get through to Falcon, I think because of the noise. And eventually I spoke to the Telstar, to Big Daddy, and I asked him if we could rather withdraw. He wasn't very happy with that, and told me that I got a yellow stripe on my back and I should attack and go forward. Well, I actually refused, and I said, no, I'm not going to do that. And he then spoke to Falcon, I think, and then I got the command, okay, you can withdraw. And I withdrew to the echelon point where the vehicles with all the spare ammunition and things were. I was in that area, or we were in that area when we heard that the people were looking for Charles Miller, that he is gone. They don't know where he is. The fight was still going on, but everybody was worried, and we all of us thought that maybe he had been captured. I know that there was communication to the stopper groups that they had to look out for any vehicles or anybody going in a northerly direction, because we thought that they had caught him. After the main fight, that was now in the afternoon, about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, Falcon wanted us, because there had already been vehicles going to the north. He said that we should get people on the buffels, the 4 buffels, and that we should follow up towards the north. If the stopper groups could stop a vehicle, and if they could get Charles back, we were there to go and assist. I was in one of the buffels. Jim Ross was in a buffel. I know Sergeant Major Ickerman was in a buffel. I don't know if it was Falcon himself or who else was in the 4th buffel. But we then advanced through the town and then in a northerly direction, running parallel between the road. One of the buffels on the road, the others of us more towards the flat land, towards the river. We could see a lot of people running, and we could hear that there was things happening in the north as well, that the Recces had started to encounter resistance, or they had ambushed people. Alright, to make a long story short, Charles was not retrieved from the vehicles, or we didn't find him there, and we moved back. They started sweeping through the area where we had where Alpha and Foxtrot had fought through, and that's when they found Charles in a trench where he had, seemed like he was shot in the arm, I think, and while being in the trench, I think someone executed him or shot him in the head as well. I'm not very sure about that, but that's what I picked up. In any case, if I can go further, we went through the area, we swept the area, and then we stayed next to the base, or the area. We slept there, and the next day, going through the area again, check everything. I know that there was a breach building apparatus, an amphibian one, that the Willem and them blew up. Vehicles were confiscated, and we were going to move back to O'Mahony, but there were 2 people missing. Corporal Engelbrecht and one of the black troops hadn't been found.
So yeah, just to take on from midday at the lull of the battle, the HQ, Savate already retreated from the north. Alpha group were regrouping below us in the village with the support of Foxtrot. And the HQ element started moving sort of on the high ground towards the high ground that overlooked the road and the floodplains towards the river. And that's where we were. Must have been, I'm guessing, 2 or 3 o'clock by then. The quaffles had come down and started loading bodies. A few buffels had come down with ammo. And that's when the FAPLA guys started mortaring us as a precursor to making their break north with the convoy. And they were very clever. They didn't drive up the road. They correctly assumed that it was mined. And so they headed between the road and the river. And so when the mortar started landing amongst us, the buffels and the quaffle, they shot out of there like F1 cars at the start of one of those races. They were logical things. They were drawing the fire, I think. And a lot of the troops, unbeknown to Ferreira and I at the time, also started melting back towards the first aid and the logistics area at the back. I was running to jump on a buffel. They were going too fast. I didn't think it was a very good idea. Turned around, dived under a bush, not there was much cover. And Ferreira came walking out from somewhere, and he saw me and came and lay next to me and half crawled into my little indent, which I wasn't too happy about, but I had to share it with him. And so we were lying there, and I think pretty much on our own, with the mortars crashing down. Some of them were hitting the trees above us, and the shrapnel whizzing down. If I could just take a step back earlier, Willem sitting on the other side with the 14 files. He fantastic work directing the mortars onto the 14 files, which is what put them out of action. And that's why probably we didn't have those hitting us as well as the mortars. And sometime while the mortars were crashing down, I'd hardly slept the last 3-4 days. There's nothing to do but whatever. I fell asleep next to Ferreira. And I remember waking up and he was elbowing me. And when I woke up, I looked at him and he was saying, Justin. And I looked at him and said, oh. And I guess he thought I was dead, but I'd fallen asleep, you see. So anyway, he said, that's a cuck war or whatever. And I fell asleep again. And the next thing I remember is waking up with my radio with Peter Lippman calling. And Peter was saying he was one of the stopper groups, the Recces. Peter and Fritz, and the machine gunner Space Monkey was his nickname. And the Recces were deployed to the north in groups. There were 10 groups of 3 each. And I think expecting groups of 3 to hold fast against what was going to break north, I think, was a tall order in the first place. But they held their own and piled into those fleeing FAPLA properly. But Peter's radio call came through, Ferreira and I under this bush, and Mortar still coming down, and Peter said, look, there are 30 or 40 FAPLA coming towards us. He and Fritz were right up against the river, and then the rest of them were sort of dotted going up, away from the river. And he said, there are 30, 40 FAPLA coming at us, what must we do? I relayed that to Ferreira. He sort of looked at me, looked at the distance, and then said, tell him to do what he's been put there to do. And so I had to relay the order for these guys to open fire. It was like almost, I thought I was executing the guys, you know. It was a very difficult thing to do, but they opened fire, and I'm sure they can tell the rest of that story. But and then saved me to come back again. Was after that the convoy was heading north. We were still missing Charles, Muller, and Engelbrecht. And when the news of this convoy started breaking out, the initial estimate was 30 vehicles and 300 troops. And that's where Ferreira got back to the Air Force guys, the Mayotte, I think as you call it, just behind us. And there was a discussion there. He couldn't order, there's one lone gunship that was there in case of emergency. So he couldn't order the guy to fly. He had to request it, and the decision was left to the gunship pilot and his engineer. And that was Johan Mertz, and his engineer was yeah, and they volunteered, and so one lone, and also the other thing, setting the gunship up, that really blew the can off the whole clandestine nature. But Ferreira's take on it was he had to risk that rather than risk the Muller or Engelbrecht dead or alive being taken north by the FAPLA guys. So the gunship came clattering over us, and I'll never forget that you heard in the distance, a few 5 k's to the north of us, the guy opened up with his 20 mil, and you heard and then all hell broke loose as the whole convoy opened up on this one gunship. And so it wasn't long before he was saying taking hits, and he broke off, and it's just my imagination, I think, but it sort of came clattering back, making a lot more noise, and not quite smoke coming out of it, but it had that sort of effect to land behind us. And that's where Ferreira, again, throw caution to the wind, I suppose, requested all the buffels to come down. 3 arrived, one of which was the command vehicle. I was making myself look very scarce. I didn't think this was a good idea at all, and he saw me loitering off to one side, and he said, "Justin, you're coming too," as well. So which my heart sank, but yeah, got on the buffel, and that was with Ferreira, Ickerman, myself, and certainly Bruce Anders, the ops clerk stroke signaller, and Lappies, I think, and Ron Gregory, who was manning the Browning machine gun, and Sam and some guys got another one, and Jim Ross and a mortar guy, I think, was in the other one. And we took off down the hill through the village, and there were quite a few bodies lying around there, and then over the end of the runway, and I was terrified of those 14-5s, and either were just the other side. And I really thought as we came over the ridge, we'd get shredded. But luckily, after the mortars had hit the 14-5s, I remember seeing the barrels sticking up in the air and no one around. So, and then out into the floodplains, chasing after the tail end of what was left of the convoy. We eventually, all 3 buffels sort of splintered, and we eventually came back, tracked a bit, back on the road and heading gloriously up this smooth road, and reminded Ferreira that we'd mined the Recce's had put a mine on the road. So he started wriggling in the seat a bit, tightening the seat belt, and then ordered the driver to duck off. And we came in from the front of what was left of the convoy and hit it from there. And then, yeah, we ended up going back quite late as it was getting dark, back to everyone where everyone was regrouping. But I think the Recce guys must tell us their story. I mean, 10 groups of 3 each against, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 300 acts, 3 north.
To continue, Peter and myself were in the second group up from the river. The group closest to the river was Savate and Makali, I think, one down from us. Might have been Gavin and somebody else. But listening to Justin's description of the timeline, it's quite interesting because really the reconnaissance grouping as such really didn't have an idea of what was actually happening in the battle itself. We were still walking in when the first mortars began to fall, and when we heard that gunfire we knew that the simple ops that we had anticipated was not going to eventuate. That the companies were going to have a mammoth battle on their hands. So we broke off as we walked down, the last group broke off, second last and so on and so forth, then ourselves, and eventually Zach and Mike Kylie, we were the first group up against the river. And with the experience that T2 had built up over the years at that stage, we knew that there were going to be breakout groups trying to get away from the camp, wanting to get away, and the only obvious escape route for them was to follow the river north. So we knew we were going to be in action that day. To what extent we didn't quite know yet, but it was quite clear that there were more people in their camps than we anticipated. But that was not the gunfire of 300 or 350 people. It was a lot more. You know, as Justin said, you can't describe it. It was, we've never heard that volume of fire before. Never in the history of that unit had we heard that volume of fire before. And we had already had some big battles before them, not that we were involved in, but the unit had. So we prepared. We knew what was going to come our way. And I happened to be in front with myself and Alberto, and Peter was slightly behind us with the radio. And I wasn't aware of Peter's radio call at the time. But I've described that those people advancing towards us was like a biblical horde. And that, honestly, that's the best description I can give it. It was just masses of people coming towards us. So Peter rightly understood that we could be in trouble here. I was focused on that group and getting fire down towards them to keep them away. But they also understood they actually wanted to escape. They didn't want to hang around and have a battle. They wanted to get away. But when you're facing that amount of people, you know you've got to keep them as far away from you as possible, and don't let them start taking a bead on you and getting superior fire down in you. So Bertie with the PKM, myself with my AK, we just started lying down much further. And Peter, obviously, once he got off the radio, joined us. And we just laid down as much fire as we could. The other groups realized what was going on. They started to run towards us to help out. Zach and Mike also came running up from the river to help us. But together, I think we must probably have 4 groups, 2 groups to our right and Zach to our left. They were able to put down fire on these guys and suppress them. And from that point onwards, we were continuously in contact. There were hordes and hordes of people heading north. And we were the only people bringing them in freedom. So we were constantly at it all the time. I never felt that we would be overrun, because I had confidence in all of us. We had a lot of battle experience at that time. We'd been in a lot of contact at that time. We knew what we were doing. And I was confident that our training would overcome these people, and it did. We survived it. Peter is going to continue from this point, but we had a lot of contacts that day. When I mean a lot, I'm not talking here about 10. I'm talking we had 20 plus probably that day, one way or the other, and that's apart from the initial skirmish that we had. We were constantly busy that day.
My name is Peter Lippman. I was in 3-2 from 1979 to 1980, and I was lucky to be involved in Savate. Just to carry on from where Kevin left off, whilst with these guys coming towards us, they were all in box formation, and obviously we opened up fire immediately because we didn't want to get them, let them get too close to us. So we opened up fire, and it was also quite a barrage. And then Space Monkey, our machine gunner, got shot. And that's when I climbed on the radio, because we didn't have much sufficient firepower. It was just myself and Fritzy, because Space Monkey was out of action. And obviously there was a big lull from our side in firepower. So Fritzy was on the... I radioed then to Justin and asked and requested a chopper because of Space Monkey being shot, and I wanted a Casavac. And Fritzy was busy with his AK, and then he ran out of ammunition, and then he stole my M79 and carried on with the Nortje.
I just borrowed it.
And so we carried on. And in all of this action, and that the fire, the fire in the grass had caught alight, and there was fire all over the place as well. And Fritzy went back to go and also try and get help from Zach or the other teams further up than that. And in that, Fritzy left his Machila. He discarded the Machila and was just lying there. And it was actually quite comical, because after the whole event we were looking for Fritzy's kit and we couldn't find it anywhere. Eventually we saw something in the tree, and it was part of his sleeping bag. And it was exploded in there because he had all sorts of things in his kit. So anyway, then we got reinforcements. All the other sticks came down and assisted us in sort of like maybe stabilizing the situation, because we didn't have sufficient firepower at our particular point.
When Fritzy and Peter pick up the gunfight on the left, we was about maybe I would say 700 meters to his right hand side. And when I saw the guys coming, and they were in a box formation and the vehicles, and I realized our vehicles didn't have canvas. And it was a lot of vehicles, like a lot. And my initial assessment, that's a battalion-sized force coming down along the river, and we will be overrun. So the order was given, like I explained a little before, to make an attack. And so we started the attack. But the problem was that every team was 400 meters apart, spread over the river, from the river, over the road, that way, to the other side. To the eastern side. So a lot of the guys had to run very far. So we would start swinging, and while we were swinging, the guys were focusing on the contact with Fritzy and Peter. And we heard also the news that they were in trouble at that stage. So we start running, and we ran slower, and the guys on the other side had to catch up very fast. So we engaged when Swanee started firing. But the moment Swanee fired, we fall flat in the tall grass. We were still about 500 meters to help Fritzy. So we were firing over a long distance. But there was no time to fire initially. The grass roots on top of us were shot off. We was lying in the grass, myself, Kevin, and our machine gunner. The grass sprinkles falls down. So we wait for the other guys, and we start fighting back as much as possible. So when the other guys start doing fire and movement, and we wait for them. So we were separated in two groups. On our side, on the right hand side now, attacking the flank of the battalion side force coming out. So the guys will start fighting, but one group on the far right hand side were far behind. So we moved, and we stay in a fire space. I ran down, I helped them come up, because we was afraid that the fire arcs would cross. So we wait for them, they catch up. And then there was a problem in the long grass, we couldn't see. So you are firing a lot, but you can't see and you don't get effective fire. So you need to come up. So Billy Boats got with the idea, let's start throwing phosphorus grenades in the grass. That's where the fire started. So when we start getting a lot of fire, in the fire and movement is over a long distance, it's like a couple of hundreds of meters. I can remember at one stage my throat was so sore for the fire and movement. I came into there was a pool of water and I grabbed the water and drink the water, and Piet van Eden and Willem and the three thought I got hit because I fall down. They reported like that, but I only drank water. And then we start throwing the phosphor grenades, and the wind was in our favor. So the fire came, we throw a couple of phosphor grenades, and we start moving directly behind the fire. And we start picking a lot of guys off. But it was like Fritzie said, there was not one contact, it was a continuous contact up to the river. Luckily we had a lot of ammunition. I think each guy had in the vicinity of 600 rounds or so we could sustain the fire, and every three-man team had a machine gun. And eventually we came to the site. But it was very clear that we start getting in big trouble. So somebody coordinated with the chopper. When the chopper initially arrived, you must remember, a chopper do not flow in single pairs according to standard operational procedures, and the lack of funds and whatever we face because of the sanctions thing must be two. So that pilot, in my personal opinion, saved their life. We would have lost a lot of people if it wasn't for that pilot. That pilot. Somebody coordinated the pilot and told him, as the pilot come close, he's shooting the vehicles out. So he shoot out the front vehicles and they start burning. And that start turning the fight in our favor, and the fire sort of lift, and the fires that we are burning because of the phosphor grenades that we throw. As they lift the fire, somebody coordinated on the radio every time for the chopper. He came closer, if he draw too much fire, you could see the traces going up to the chopper. Then he goes back. And when he's far away, he comes closer. And I can tell you, if it wasn't for that chopper, we would have lost a lot of guys.
Hi, I'm Zach Garrett. I was with the 32 Battalion Reconnaissance Group from end of 1978 through to 1980. And I was very privileged to have fought with my colleagues and my countrymen at Savate. It had started with Willem having been deployed to do reconnaissance of the base, and I was tasked to lead the Recce stopper group in, and it was quite a privilege to actually be on the same side as the 30 or the other 29 people with me. We went in, as you've heard before, and we laid the stopper groups out with quite a long distance in between. I think the big thing here was we weren't expecting what was actually going to happen. So even though the bombing had started when we were still moving into position, it was a matter of dropping each stick off, some laying ambushes, and others just acting as stopper groups. But we had a vast area on the north to try and protect and also stop anybody leaving the base. And I think where we were expecting small groups of 2 or 3 or whatever to come running out of the base, which we could handle quite easily, as discussed earlier by Fritz and Peter, all of a sudden we were faced with a mammoth amount of people coming at us, and you know, when you're sitting down there with 3-man stopper groups, it's quite intimidating. And I know that when we first took fire, or first gave fire and then took fire, we were right up against the river, and it was the natural course for everybody to come down and follow the river, as Fritz said. So there were a lot of people on the river side moving up, although the vehicles were on the road a couple of 100 meters away moving north. But the volume of people and coming out of that base was a little bit daunting, and you know, hats off to everybody involved, because you know, we only had a certain amount of ammunition. We had to lay down a sheet of firepower to try and stop these guys. And I think with the radio contact and everyone saying that we actually needed the help, because we were in big trouble at one stage. you know, when that chopper came in, I know half of it was in lieu of trying to stop the vehicles up ahead and trying to stop if Shah had been taken. We could at least stop those vehicles. But one thing that I'm trying to remember, and that while we were sitting there and the bombing was carrying on, before we engaged, we heard enemy aircraft behind us. And it hasn't been mentioned, but it was very, very scary because we knew there was a base up there, and we didn't know whether it was helicopters or whether it was bombers, but we could hear aircraft in the area. And then we were thinking that yes, maybe they are sending ground troops down to help from the north. And it was in that same time where we, in the next 10 minutes, we took on the firepower and we took on the enemy. So all of a sudden we forgot all about what was happening behind us. And with the noise and everything else, you weren't aware of what was there. And I think only when the helicopter came in, the gunship came in, did we realize, or I realized that from up there, if there is, suddenly I realized we haven't thought about this, but if there is someone behind us, at least these guys are going to be able to see them. So it was sort of a relief that they hadn't reported any aircraft behind us coming in, and then at least we could engage with the pilot. And you know, it was one of those things where when you were listening to the radio, and as much as that gunship was, you know, helping us take people out, the amount of people who were coming at us then turned and went east, tried to get over the river. And I don't know if anybody else remembers this, but I can remember the flight sergeant over the radio talking on the radio, just saying about how many crocodiles were actually climbing into these guys who were now trying to cross the river, get out of our way, get out of the helicopter's way, and they thought they could cross the river. And it was actually quite frightening because, you know, even afterwards, the main sort of talk about was how many crocodiles actually got people. And it's one of those things where, yes, when they eventually started running, we knew that we were in control. We were very, very low on ammo. I think quite a few of the people in the stopper groups had run out, and we were just very lucky on the day. Although we had taken the firepower we thought with us, we just didn't expect what was coming at us. And you know, it's one of those things where hats off to everybody involved. You know, from the guys who all joined forces to come in from the west to help us moving up and trying to, you know, put a solid sheet down. It was those things where we had a bit of history and we had a bit of knowledge, and we were lucky had a bit of experience. And when you're surrounded by, you know, sort of 9 stick leaders with that experience, you feel comfortable in the knowledge that you can do this. And I think that's the big thing.
Gavin Mon, 3-2 Recce group. We got to the debussing point and everyone had to carry extra mortars to help out. And I kind of adopted a French anti-tank weapon called an LRAC. It was an 89mm. It's made out of composite material, fiberglass, and I'd used this a couple of times and I really liked it. And the beauty of it, it was very light. So I was patting myself on the back because I didn't have to carry any mortars, because I was carrying missiles for the anti-tank weapon, and all these other guys were struggling with the heavy mortar bombs, so I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Anyway, we got to the dispersal point where the stopper groups had to head up north-northwest as the road went north-northwest, and the platoons carried on in a different direction. And then we hit the really thick bush that we were going through, and this thing was quite a long, cumbersome thing. And that's when I started cursing. I thought, you know, you thought you were one step ahead of the game, but now I had this thing, and it was bulky, and it was sticking onto everything. And I thought, you thought you were clever, but you weren't at the end of the day. So the other guys have pretty much told you what happened. We struggled through the thick bush through the night, and we got to our points where we had to set up the stopper groups. I was part of the group that actually had to lay an ambush along the road. And the rest of the stopper groups were dispersed between the river and the road. With me was Stefanus Opperman, Billy Boats, and then my direct commander, stick leader at that point in time, was a guy called Eric Rabi. So we set up there, and our job was to make sure if any vehicles came up, we were to take them out. And that's obviously why I was deployed with them, because I had the anti-tank weapon. And when the firing, the mortar started, then when the firing started, I thought, I am so sorry for those guys that are in the companies, in the frontal attack, because it was heavy. It was really heavy. And one part of you says, glad I'm not there, but then the other part of you says, I really feel sorry for my comrades. So we then saw the vehicles starting to move along the river, and they were kind of bumping along because it was rough terrain. They'd obviously figured out if they came up the road, they were going to get nailed. I didn't have the benefit of having a radio. Eric Robbie had the radio, so he knew what was going on. But I saw all these vehicles, and I had this anti-tank weapon, and I was chomping at the bit to get down there, because we were I estimate it was about 1 kilometer from the road to the river where they were going along. And I was chomping to get down there and start drilling these guys with this anti-tank weapon. But Eric Rabi said to me, Gavin, you stay here, you don't not move. And in my brain I'm thinking, should I disobey a direct order, or should I get my ass down there and let these guys have it? But sanity prevailed, and now I figured out he had received instructions because of Sean Miller that we're not allowed to let anything get past, and that's why he probably wanted to make sure that we kept the firepower on the road. Anyway, Billy Boats and Oppies were with me, and they decided to go. And Eric said to me, Gavin, you stay here. So off they went, and I had to stay. But I was bleating because I wanted to get into it. And eventually, Eric let me go. And I remember getting down to Peter Lipman. Pete and I were very close. Our birthdays are on the same day. We grew up in the same area, so we've always been close. And I remember getting to Piet, and Piet said to me, today I thought I was dead. Today I thought I was going to meet my maker. But unfortunately for me, I did get off a few rounds, did get to shoot a bit, but nothing as much as my colleagues did. And I still regret it to this day.
I'm Rick Lobb. I was a corporal in the Reconnaissance group, and I was also very privileged to be a part of the Savate, the Battle of Savate. My stick leader was a guy called Gavin Veenstra. He was also quite a large lad, like Piet van Eden and Tabu Marais. And in my memory, I recall that Gavin and I and a troop who I can't remember, the machine gun carrier, were also stopped near the road going north. And anyway, to cut a long story short, as everybody said, we heard the initial fighting start, and beside the odd big bang 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 of the mortars going off, it really sounded like, the only way I can describe it is it sounded like canvas tearing. The small arms fire, and it just went on and on and on. And as Gavin once says, I was saying the same as him. I was saying, geez, I'm only glad I'm not there with those guys, but look, I feel sorry for them. Anyway, cut a long story short, I had no radio. Gavin was in charge of the radio, and we heard vehicles. I heard vehicles coming up from the south. And I said to Gavin, yes, Gavin, I hear vehicles, man, I hear vehicles. And he said, hey? And then he also thought he heard vehicles because there was a lot of bangs and firing going on. And he said to me, I'm going to pull you up this tree here. And me being a smaller, it was easy for him he pushed me up the tree, and I looked and I saw a lot of action coming our way. And I said, Gav, there are lank of them. And he said, you lie. And I said, I'm telling you they are. And he dropped me down, and then me and the troop that were with us had to try and push Gavin up the tree because he also wanted to have a look. You know, we got him up there and he had a look, and I remember him turning around and saying, Rick, they're fucking lank of them. And then he dropped down, and I had an M72, one of those disposable rocket launchers, and so did he. And we ran to the road, and those were starting to come past us now, and we just let vip. And then Gavin said, come, and we ran, and we joined up with Zach, Peter, Swannies, and all those, and swept through the Shona from the west, sort of like going like in a west, but more to a northwesterly direction, and tracing them to the river. And that's when everybody heard I don't know if it was the chopper pilot or Big Daddy that was saying, yeah, there's another one, he's got another one, oh, he's got another one. And it was the crocs eating the gooks going across the river. And I just thank everybody that was working on that operation, especially Willem and Piet for doing that, the initial reconnaissance on that. And Yassin, what a privilege working with these guys. Thanks.
Stefan Bowie in the dock. I'm going to go a little bit backwards again, because from where we walked in as well. Recce van Zyl was to go and have the small medical aid station, and he walked in. He was always with Falcon when they walked in when we went into the single line, and I was right further at the back. So when we walked in, of course, we were at the back of this long single file. We passed the truck that was shot. I can't remember whether I carried the mortar. I vaguely remember, of course, I had extra medical kit on me. The guys told me I can be relieved. I didn't have to carry a mortar shot, which I was very glad not to do. Anyway, so I was at the back, and then when we came, we divided. Jim Ross guys went to the right, and most of the center guys with Falcon went to the middle, and we went to the left. But I didn't know at the time that Sam was the one in the front, because we were so far behind him. But we went to the left, and in the dark eventually, and then we went, myself and Grant Larkin, he was the other medic who was with me. We went further to the left with some guide who took us to a clearing just on over the side of the runway. Because I could remember the runway. I was told the runway was there. There was a water tower there, and then the town on the side. And we stayed in this clearing. And the minute the fight started, the noise started. And as the people said, you have to remember the noise. Many years after the time, they asked me, what do I remember about it? And I said, I have never heard so much noise in my entire life as during that battle, or in my entire life, wherever I've been. But as soon as it started, the helicopters came in and landed in the same clearing where we were waiting. And that was one Puma that was flown by Tiens Meyer, and then with his flight crew, and with Des Lynch, who was the SAF liaison officer, and Commandant Ulrich. And then Johan Mats came with the Ellen. And we parked there and we waited. And we had a radio, and we were around this radio, so the radio heard everything. Big Daddy in the Telstar with Chisholm started to rain. Falcon, we heard the orders go on and everything. And also the desperation when it was noticed that Charles Miller was missing. The radio that was going to and fro, where's Charles, looking at for him. The big concern, as you say, probably caught. So at some stage, when the battle carried on, the first aid station manned by Recce began to be overrun. It's now not in the back anymore, it was part of the battle. And they were already treating wounded. And when that happened, Falcon radioed to us on the Puma that the Puma must now come forward because they've got running out of equipment and at the first aid station, and I need to go and help. So at that time, I knew Recce van Zyl had 2 drips and 3 or 4 sausagons and injection, other stuff that he could carry on. He had nothing. What we did is we loaded a whole ammo case, one of these metal ammunition cases, and we left it in the Puma the day before we came, and Tins Meyer brought it along that I and Grant had in our possession. So we took off, and we were flying short distance towards this area, and the minute I was sitting inside, I didn't know what happened, but the chopper suddenly just pulled up, dived to the side, and we came back and we landed behind the tree. And I asked the guys what's happening, and they were telling us they were being shot at by the 14,5, drawing fire. And then Tien's radio to the guys that you chaps had to go and take out those 14,5s first because they couldn't go in anymore, they were being shot at. So then we stood there for a short while with Ron Madstall there, and then they radioed us and they said the 14,5 was taken out, we can now go in. So we took off and we landed. Just about part of that second bombardment was going on in town here. Because I remember this massive bomb. I thought the fight was over, and they said no, it's still coming on. But I found Recce in absolute shock. He had nothing. They were wounded, lying in rows with absolutely nothing on them. Now, what nobody's mentioned here, which was a very bad thing for the troops, is we had no water that whole day and part of the previous day because we were late and we ran the water that was allocated. It was so hot and dusty. No troops had water. Neither did the guys who were shot. They were all dehydrated and they were lying in the sun in there for 3-4 hours already. So in medicine we've got the golden hour rule. You have to get the guy dripped, sorted out if you want to give him a chance of survive. I had the stuff, I was loading out all the stuff, and then what I did, I was supposed to stay there with Richard van Zyl, and the Grant Larkin was supposed to take the troops back, the wounded, but I knew these guys needed tips. There were 23 wounded people lying there. One of them was a FAPLA, somehow, a FAPLA wounded guy, and there was one body bag. And what we did is we started loading. The guy started loading the wounded onto the Puma immediately, and I went to Recce and I gave him a few things. By that time most of the thing was over, and I took what I needed to look after all the guys inside. And then as Boat said, I must mention that we didn't get the Norris Cruises at that place. But Recce told me that Anderson, sitting here, who was speaking just now, when they were overrun, Anderson, John had his femur shot off, and he couldn't stand. He was carried to the sick aid, to the AIDS post. But when they were overrun, Anderson stood up and he threw the Recce down. He lied on top of him. He started shooting to protect the doctor, and that never got recognition for anything. And I asked Andy after that, why did you do it, Willipin? And he said, he doesn't know it. He doesn't know. He was so full of Sossugon and everything. But that's how they protected the doctors, really. So anyway, we loaded the guys in, and I then elected to go back, and we took off. Just the minute everything finished, Falcon said we could now go, run. We'll go back to Rundu. And left Recce there with all the stuff. But at that time there were very few guys, no more deaths. The deaths were all over. A few small injuries, which I'll talk about later on the next day. And I flew back to Rundu with him, and in that time, what happened is that I was busy packing in, and Piet Nortje helped me carrying the wounded in. And I was in the door, and Piet was in this little corner in the back of the Puma towards the back side, and he was busy helping putting wounded guys sitting up there. And the flight engineers just came and they said, come on, climb in, we're taking off now, it's going to be dark, and they closed the door behind us, leaving Piet Nortje and my Mashila standing against a tree there at the first aid post, which I never saw that again. But anyway, so Piet was then coming here, and myself, and then thank heavens he was there, because my medic was now with Recce. And I started dripping everybody, including Andy. And I dripped everybody except one person in that thing with Piet helping me, giving me the needles and stuff. And I remember still that the body bag, there was a wounded Rhodesian soldier, ex-Rhodesian, who was lying there, had a gunshot through his stomach. And I was battling to put the drip up on. He was lying in the door. And I had to sit on the body bag, the body, to get to him, to work there. I couldn't get there any other way. And the other thing is, we were always bumping the guys, and the young soldiers there, even though I hurt them, they never said a word. They just watched and quiet and lied there. Nobody said anything if I hurt them that day. So anyway, we landed at Rundu, and we took out the 23 people. So I asked the chopper guys, how often do you put 23 people in a Puma? Not often happens. So if there's no kit, it's okay, but with kit there's no way you'll get that many people. So we had 23 wounded plus me and Piet still in there. So we did a triage. The worst guys we put into another Puma. No, we put into the same Puma, excuse me. And I kept the lesser injured guys, and I took them to the little ward, the tent that we made there. And they took off, and then everybody, the Piet went and had something to drink. By that time, Big Daddy was landing with the other doctor because he had to go to Rundu with the wounded. And then I started working on the wounded guys. And when I examined all of them, I had one guy that it looked like he had small wounds, but I found he was shot through his chest as well. So that was the only guy, that little hospital that I was talking about earlier, was actually used where I took him that night and I put an underwater drain on that little theatre table onto his chest, put him in the ward, and that was that for the night. And then I finished working there about 10, 11 o'clock at night, and then went to look for supper and food and so on. Although they brought us water the minute we were there, they gave us something to drink.
Okay, cool.
I'm going to take a step back. When Falcon and myself spoke about at some stage we did speak about it. By that time we had talked about reconnaissance using clippers. Now, clipper is a foldable canoe type boat that you can carry, and then when you come to a river or a lake you can assemble it and then use it on a lake. And to me it seemed ideal for operations that required crossing rivers or doing reconnaissance on places that were reachable by river. And that was sort of in the air already at that stage. And then this thing came up. CSI, which is Chief Staff Intelligence, they were involved with Rita. And one of the main liaison figures was a big friend of Falcon called Mo Ulzich. And I think Mo Ulzich told Falcon about the space, Savate, to begin with. And this thing developed. And as sort of appeared afterwards, it was given the go-ahead to do a reconnaissance, but the attack wasn't really officially approved yet. But somewhere along the line, the word verkennen in Afrikaans means reconnaissance, shortened to Verk, in other words V-E-R-K, got misunderstood for werk, which is work, which is W-E-R-K. So the signal saying carry on with the reconnaissance, which they say was the original signal, which was abbreviated to carry on with a V-E-R-K, verkennen, got interpreted by Falcon and then as carry on with the work, in other words, do the operation itself. That's just as an introduction to this. The base was on the River Kavanga. As the River Kavanga comes down and then it turns east and it forms the border between Angola and South Africa. But inside Angola, you had this main base, Savate, which UNITA was very worried about. And they were actually scared of it, I think. And they were hoping that 3-2 Battalion, being a Portuguese-speaking battalion, being able to do that sort of pseudo-op, pretending to be UNITA, that they would take the place for them so they could secure their flank, because it was a continual thorn in their side. Not only that, but it was the main base on the way to supply all the other river bases. So if Savate was taken out, all the river bases opposite Runtu would fall, which eventually happened. That's exactly what Savate caused. So it was operationally seen from the planning side, was actually a very good idea to take Savate out. Now, the information that was given to us, to our sort of people, was it might be manned or it might not be manned. That was the main question. Was it manned or was it empty or was it manned? And they were talking about a company, 100, maybe 200, at the most 300 people. That's what they were talking about, the figures. And Falcon's order was for us to confirm what is going on. Is it manned, number one? And if it is manned, okay, how many? But they was basically assumed that it couldn't be more than about 200, 300 people. So this is the background to the whole reconnaissance and the eventual attack. So on that basis he planned. 3-2 was a battalion, obviously, with several companies, and the others have mentioned which companies were involved. But it was enough to take out a place, even if it was manned to its fullest extent, as we thought it would be 300 people. And another factor which I think is important to remember, that 3-2 Battalion was actually a very experienced battalion. It had lots of operational experience. It had very good soldiers, both black and white, probably the best that you could field, that we could field at that stage. And yeah, that is, I think, the main thing to remember, even if there was no air support, because obviously, as long as that picture could be maintained that this was a UNITA attack, they wouldn't want to use air power. So it was purely infantry against infantry. And there, as I said, it was about the best that we could put into the field, the troops that we had. And Falcon was in charge, and the way he planned it shows what an excellent commander he was. He didn't just stumble in there. He gave us the task to do the reconnaissance, and he accepted the idea of a riverborne reconnaissance, because the big advantage of a boat is that you don't leave any tracks. And in southern Angola, your biggest problem, if you want to do a reconnaissance, is whatever you do, you will leave tracks, because it's sand and it's bush and you just can't hide your tracks. So they'll pick you up. But if you can do it in such a way that you are on a river and you work from a river, then you basically can get away with murder. And the plan was, as Piet probably already discussed in detail, was for us to get dropped off to the west, but so far north that we'll be past Savate, that if we go east and we hit the river, we are far away north of Savate. We can just launch and we can leisurely row down with the flow until we reach Savate, which we can then do at night. We can just sneak in at night when they're all asleep, beach them on the shore and do our thing, come back onto the river, and they'll never know what happened. There'll be no spoor, there'll be nothing to for them to realize that they've been actually that we've done a reconnaissance, and then report back to him, and then he could plan accordingly and make any last minute adjustments if he's already on his way. And the original plan was for the reconnaissance to allow 2 days, 2 full days, for him to plan, so that we could get the message to him 2 days before HR, in other words, H-2. And it would have worked that way if as Piet also explained, if Mr. Long had dropped us off at the place where he was supposed to drop us off. They told us, he was the expert on that part of southern Angola, and as we all know, he slipped up badly, and instead of dropping us off northwest, he dropped us off directly west of Savate. So when we walked east, and he dropped us off much further west than we had actually anticipated. But in the bush you don't know. I mean, you can only go on your drop-off point. And he said to us, okay, you are here now. And that from there we planned. So we accepted that we were where we were supposed to be. Meantime, we were there. And when we walked east, we were walking directly into Savate, in the direction of Savate itself. Well, that's where we lost our first 24 hours, because it was far further than we thought, and it took us an additional night to get close to the river. And then, fortunately, we heard vehicles, and because still believing that we are north of Savate, we thought it was maybe a convoy that had stopped there, and so we decided to just angle a bit off to the right, so we go past the convoy and launch our boats, obviously at night, everything at night. And which we did. So we launched our boats and we rowed down the river, thinking we are now still north of Savate. Meantime, obviously, we are now already south. The UNITA guy wasn't much help at that stage, because he just didn't know, and I was getting frustrated, because the more I asked him now, can you recognize something? Are we getting closer to Savate? He just doesn't know. At least he was honest. He said, doesn't know. So we kept on rowing. And it was actually quite beautiful. Piet hasn't mentioned it yet, but while rowing, we had 2 boats. We were 5 of us. It was Piet, Smoothie, Baumeister, Paulo, Chevali Paulo, one of our best, if not the best, ex-Angolan black troops, and then the UNITA guy. And at night there was no moon, it was just, you see the shadows on the side, and you glide along, and suddenly you've got these 4 huge elephants standing on the side, totally quiet, not a sound, and you glide past, you sort of freeze in your boat, and you look up at these monsters looking down on you. It's actually quite something you'll never forget. And eventually we got to a few houses, one of these old Portuguese settlements, and we beached the boats. Now, obviously I said to him, is this Savate? No, I said, it's not Savate. So we looked around, there was no airfield, so I knew it wasn't Savate. And then suddenly it clicked, and the UNITA guy said, no, this is, I can't remember what it was, Pande or Pedro, one of these little settlements, and he recognized it. And he said, but we are south of Savate. Now you can imagine that was after midnight, 1 o'clock or maybe even 2 o'clock. And I think we also had a few leaks. We'd gone through a rapid, by the way, going downstream through a rapid. It's not a good thing, but it's not as frightening as going upstream. And the boat had taken a leak, and we fixed that. And then we had a choice, now give up or try and get back up the river, row upstream. And I still don't know, which brings me to maybe I should mention at this stage, the quality of people we had. Rowing at that stage, I mean, everything is against you. You still only got a few hours of daylight left. HR was supposed to be the next night's morning. In other words, we were already the second half of the night, then a day. Then that night, the troops should have been on their way to the forming up place, and that morning the attack should have gone in. And that was all laid down. There was no, we knew the thing was already in motion. There was no going back. So we now had to row back upstream through the rapids and further. And I still don't know to this day how we did it. Okay, we were younger, and but still, it's testimony to the extreme fitness and determination that was there in the battalion at that stage. And obviously in the rapids, the radio I think was already buggered, the big means through water, and it finally conked out, which we found out the next day. So then, just before first light, we actually reached a point on the river where we could see Savate, and then we went back a bit downstream, sunk the boats, which we normally did underwater with a rope tied onto something hidden as far as possible, so that even if they walk past they won't realize their boats there. And then we sort of snuggled into the bushes on the other side of the river. Savate was this side and we stayed on the eastern side, and we hid for the day. And at one stage a vehicle came down, probably for patrol or whatever, and went back up and on the other side, so we were quite safe. Yeah, and the next night we waited a while, and then we took the boats out and got the water out and relaunched and rowed up to Savate. And Piet has already covered that. All I'd like to add to that is that okay, we knew that the base was occupied. The vehicles had told us, because now obviously we put two and two together. It wasn't a convoy, it was Savate itself, where all the vehicles were moving. We saw that one vehicle, we saw the place at night, there was quite a lot of activity. So we knew it was occupied, but the question is how many people, more or less. But we didn't have comms, that's something else that is important to remember. The big means the big radio didn't work. I think we made comms because when we didn't report in on the radio, they sent a Telstar up, and we told them that our radio doesn't work, and there's been a big delay because of what I explained earlier on, but we will still be able to go in that last night and confirm. So we should get the message to them the next morning just before they attack. So then, yeah, as I said, we then went in, we left smoothly by the boats on the side of the river, at the base, at the airstrip actually, where the airstrip starts. And then Piet and the UNITA guy went to Recce, a good mortar position, because his task was to wait for the mortars actually, before first light, get them in position so at first light they'll be able to start mortaring. That is if the whole plan had gone according to what we thought was going to happen. But in the meantime, the whole battalion had also bogged down time-wise, and everything was behind schedule, the hours behind schedule. So the mortars didn't even get within small means range. So by the time it was getting onto first light, Piet had to pull back. Couldn't wait for them, and he didn't even have comms. He didn't even get comms on the small means. And meantime, I'd gone down the airstrip, and on the right-hand side there was heavy stuff that we could make out. On the left-hand side, there was so much activity. There were trenches, and there was snoring, and there was clanking of weapons, and it was just, you just got the impression there's a lot of activity, and obviously a lot of troops there. So the 300 was totally wrong. There was at least a battalion, if not more, in that base. And there were heavy support weapons. So now we obviously knew more or less what we wanted to know, and we met up again at the boats, jumped in, rowed to the other side. There was some thicket on the other side, sunk the boats again and hid in the bushes and trees, and and started trying to make comms on the small means, and watched the other shore, which was lying in front of us like a picture card. And then sometime in the morning, now first thing that we realized is the attack is delayed. There was nothing happening at first light, and for a few hours after that as well, there was nothing happening. And then eventually, I think 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, from what I remember, the mortars did get into position, the troops got into position, and the battle started with a mortar bombardment. And we were in a fortunate position that we could give corrections for the mortars and later also for anyone else who was involved. But otherwise the battle was hidden in the bushes on the other side behind the village. The stopper groups from our wing, those 10 three-man teams which have been mentioned, their task was, as said before as well, to stop anything going north. So they were in position to the north. By the time the battle started, they were more or less in position. And we knew they were there. Something that I'd also like to add to this stopper line is that that's another thing that was in our favour. We had the principle of maximum firepower. Normally in a platoon you've got one machine gun and then the rest is rifle. We actually had, every third man had a machine gun. So every team had a machine gun and 2 others at least, plus all the other weapons like anti-tank, portable ones that were mentioned. Plus they had maximum ammo. Someone else mentioned 600 rounds per man. That is quite possible. But that principle was established in our little unit, and that helped them to survive. As said, it was a close thing, but I think if it wasn't for the maximum power principle, it would have been much closer, if not worse. And then we sat there, and in between we had a mug of tea, and we felt quite top of the world watching the battle unfold. But we're getting worried, because obviously, as also pointed out already, there was a lot of noise. It was, to us, it sounded like the Second World War broken out on the other side. And then suddenly, at one stage, I saw this mass of vehicles and troops emerging into the open to the north of the base, pulling out, as it turned out to be. But it was a frightening sight. I knew there was only 10 three-man teams lying there, and now you've got this huge force moving onto them. And there were lots of troops with these monokashitas, these single-barreled monokashitas, the 122mm rocket launchers. They were there amongst the troops, quite a lot of them. I could see them clearly, and someone else also pointed out they were actually, when they got cornered, they fired those rockets. It was another thing raining down on the stop line. Yeah, and that's where I sort of wasn't so happy anymore, because obviously it was quite worrying to see this force being taken on by those little teams. And as has come out already, they did very, very well. Again, due to the quality of the guys we had, and the sheer determination to do what they were there to do. Like when Piet came on the radio, apparently he got told by Falcon or someone when he was facing this huge, massive enemy. He was asking him, "What should I do?" He said, "Well, you're supposed to be a stopper group, so stop them." So and stop them they did with the help of, as also been said already, with the support by the mortars and by the mainly also by the chopper, by the gunship, and also by the HQ elements jumping into buffels with Brownings and attacking them from one side. So in the end it all turned out well, and our blokes won the day. And some stage during the afternoon after the battle was when we rode over and joined the other blokes, the other blokes from Amani. And we discovered a lot of Monokashita rockets lying around there. And I was thought...
In a full store?
Sorry?
In a store full?
Yeah, they were lying around the bush everywhere. The other side where I'd seen at night, where I'd seen the activity and all the signs of big support weapons, they were lying there. A lot of them had left behind. And Ron had always told me, listen, we're wasting too much explosives, we should burn more. Instead of blowing things up, we should burn things. Okay? And my mind was probably a bit addled anyway, the 1 or 2 brain cells I got. Somewhere I thought, this is an opportunity to do exactly that. Instead of blowing them up, we should burn them. So we put them all in a big hole, all these rockets, and made a lot of wood on top, and made a fire. And then we threw, thinking that this thing is now going to explode. And instead of exploding, these rockets started going off. Obviously, because they were lying in all sort of directions in this hole, so one went that way and the other one went that way and the other one went that way. Totally unpredictable hole. And there was chaos. For about half an hour or even more there was chaos because everyone was ducking and diving and trying to get away from these rockets. And thinking, now where the hell did that come from? And yours truly was cowering in a buffel and praying. I was praying that, please Lord, just let no one die today because of my fuck up. And someone listened up there, so no one actually came short. And after all the rockets had done their thing, it grew quiet again, and that was the end of the battle. And then we went back, and someone reminded me of Falcon. The next morning or so, he gave a speech to the whole battalion, because obviously everyone pulled back to Amani at some stage, and then he spoke to the troops. But I think, Stefans, you should tell us about that memorable speech.
So the next morning, most of us came to Umawuni that night, and everybody was tired, all the troops. Of course, they're from Buffalo. Most of them were from Buffalo, so they slept over that night, and the next day before they went to Buffalo, Falcon cleared them all on, gathered them all on the airport outside where the flag, the windsock was right there, the whole battalion what was left of it, with all the Morni staff and everybody. And how I remember that is because also being a lieutenant, I wasn't part of that, and I was standing behind Falcon and he was talking in front through an interpreter to the battalion, but then also there was a young guy here telling me, I can't remember what he was saying, and he was telling them how good, first of all, the terrible battle that they had, that it wasn't anticipated, how good they were, and of course the sorrow of the lost ones that we had, and how they were looked after, and how they looked after each other in the battle, and just everything, how good they were to everybody. And then at the end, of course, the troops just went into, like they loved him, you know, they went into jubilation and adored, you know, and waved or what, I can't remember what he mentioned. But they were shouting and singing and went into a song and so on. And it was just a good end, I think, from our side of the whole thing that he brought them together and spoke with.
I just want to go back to the day that we did the clearing up of the area. We had all slept around the base in safe places, and the next morning we went through the whole objective, and we were collecting intelligence material, notebooks, weapons, the vehicles that were there. They were decided on what vehicles would we take back with us to Amahoni. The rest of the vehicles, plus the amphibian bridge layer, was going to be destroyed, so that it couldn't be used anymore. But eventually, when we were finished with this whole exercise, it was decided that we were going to go back. Luckily, I don't know where they got the training from. They know how to do high volumes of fire, but they could also drive foreign vehicles, all the Recce guys. They got into the gases and the whatever, and they were tasked that they were going to drive it back to Amahoni. The rest of us, the companies, we got onto the quays, and we got taken back. But before we left there were two people missing. Corporal Engelbrecht and one of the SP soldiers. And after going through the whole area and searching for them, we couldn't find them. But we were also anxious to get away from Savate, thinking that they should have already arrived, that UNITA must come and take over there, and we don't want to be there, and we want to get out of the area. So we travelled back on almost the same route that we came in, and I think it was about 1-2 hours on the move back to Amahoni that Falcon instructed myself and Jim Ross, who was the company commander of Foxtrot. Engelbrecht was with Foxtrot when he got missing. That we should take 2 platoons and go back to Savate, because we couldn't leave there without these 2 people presence. Well, we were not sure were they captured or were they dead or whatever. So we went back. Jim knew where was the starting line of the main force for Alpha and Foxtrot, and we got our 2 platoons in line, and we started from the start line, and we walked, and we scratched in every hole and behind every bush. And at some time, someone from the Foxtrot side said, "Listen, we have found." They found the 2 bodies. They were together. The black troop lying on top of Engelbrecht also. And they were then recovered. I myself never saw them. When I heard that they had found them, I was too glad to get back to the vehicle, get my troops back, and we can move back. So those bodies were on the Foxtrot quay, and they were then taken back. I think I'll ask Doc just to explain how we found them and what the circumstances were when they were recovered. But as I say, we got them and we went back to Omaha.
I'll start by my trip back, because I think we need to mention our dead comrades as well. The next morning, when I made a mistake in the previous part, I took it to the Cazawax back to Umawuni. So the next morning from Umawuni we flew back to Savate with Tens Meyer, was myself at that time, and Big Daddy, Eddie for you, in the Puma. When we landed there, we went straight to Recce, again the first aid post, the doctor, and I found that during the night and after the battle, all these troops had brought their dead and they put them along a little line of trees. They were lying there next to each other with all their possessions or whatever they had that belonged to them. It was my task then with Sergeant Ron Gregory to put them in the body bags. The two of us plus one or two troops, I think it could have been the medics, the black medics, SP medics, helped us to cut the body bags, because we found that the body bags was too small for the South African troops, but they were okay for some of the SP troops, which was the black Portuguese troops. They were a bit smaller than the South Africans. So that there, at the time, there were 13 dead, but that extended later to 15. 2 people died in the hospital still later. So 9 were SP, the black troops died, and 6 of the leader group died. So in total we lost 15 people on that battle. So we loaded all the bodies on the Puma with Big Daddy, and he flew it out and then back to Rulu, straight to Rulu. And in that time, as Sam said, we got onto the vehicles. Sorry, what I must say is when I got there next to those troops, there was a young black Angolan girl lying alone, nothing done to her. And I got to her, and she was what we call bled out, very pale. She was shot through her left chest. So I examined her quickly, saw her, and she had, of course, our troops, Richard, had no treatment to look after our troops, so we had even less to look after the local population there. So she was lying there, still talking and so on, but with the blood and the hole here. And I said to them that we must get this girl back to Rundu as well when they take the bodies back. So he said then, load, the chopper then was gone already, and we decided we'll put the young girl on the back of a biffle, and my biffle, my medics, and we started driving back, as Sam said, to the base. And then a few hours or an hour later, we got the radio from, she said, and we had to turn back. Being the doctor, they told Sam, and they told me that I must come with him to go and look for the bodies. So I was part of that group as well. And when we went again to the same, almost to the same place on the wrong side, just outside the town, we stood and we waited there, and then the troops went to find Engelbrecht and his compatriot, comrade there. So they brought them to us. So there were a lot of rumors that goes around, like the bodies were mutilated and so on. That's what I've heard all over, even from Engelbrecht's son, that he was told that, but those bodies were never mutilated. Engelbrecht was, it looks like they stood together. With Sergeant Ron Gregory, we worked out every person who was wounded, how he was shot, including Charles Miller, Rasmus, and Timmy, Patrick. We went to everybody's Space Monkey and worked out exactly how what happened to them. So he looked like he was shot first, Engelbrecht, and he fell on his stomach with his hand under his arms, his head up, and rigor mortis had already set in by that time. They were stiff, and also post-mortem lividity. So that's a term, as you lie down in the body, your eventually you're dead, your blood sucks down, so tips down to the lower part of your body. So the top goes pale and the bottom goes blue-black. So Engelbrecht bottom was blue-black, top was pale. And on top of him, spread-eagled over like this on his back, was the black troop. So it looks like he was standing when Engelbrecht fell with his back, Engelbrecht behind him, trying to protect Engelbrecht. I don't know if he knew he was killed or not, but he was shooting and they shot him and he fell back on his back over Engelbrecht's body. So he was spread-eagled, rigor mortis went in like he was stiff like this, and his post-mortem severity was top light, bottom dark. So he was found on his back. So we had to get them in the body bags. I couldn't get them, of course they were so rigid. I had to cut Engelbrecht's body bag to get his shoes from sticking out. It was too short. Justin mentioned that in his book, that he was watching the shoes in the chopper that he went back. And the spread-eagled signaler, I had to make 4 of us, because he had to get his arms stuck out and the legs stuck out. And we had to fit Ron Gregory and myself to get him in there. We put him in there. So then when we radioed Falcon, he of course radioed Big Daddy, Eddie Viljoen, and they again brought the Puma back to get those bodies quickly. And that's, at that time, we said to Eddie Viljoen, I've got this young girl. So while we were driving to meet this chopper, this young girl was under the tail and she was holding on to my hand all the time, just talking, wouldn't let go. Watching, she was so scared. So I said to Eddie Viljoen that we can't let this kid go, and Eddie said to him, you know, this is highly irregular, not allowed to do it, but I'll take it upon myself, load her in the chopper. So when they landed there, we put the 2 body bags. Justin was wounded in his arm, and we put him in the chopper with it, and the young girl, and they then flew straight to Lulu, if I've got it, Amoni. And that's the last we saw, and then we drove back.
So, getting back to the second day when we were clearing up the battlefield, we were all over the place, and obviously everybody going through things and trying to get equipment and seeing what was scattered lying around and everything. And there was one truck, I remember, that had a sail over the back, and there was quite a bit of equipment at the back. And I looked in one of these boxes and I found a whole kist of brand new AK bayonets, which was still in the brown plastic and in oil. Needless to say, we dished all these out to all of whoever wanted one to take back with us. And everybody else was busy doing other things. I think Gav was busy with his RPG, because his rockets had been finished by that time, and he was blowing up all the vehicles that we couldn't take back. So all the vehicles that we couldn't start, Gav was sitting there with his RPG and firing into the radiator. And needless to say, you know, I don't know how many Gav destroyed, but it was almost the entire vehicle park. And on the way back, there was a tanker, a diesel tanker, and it's got exhaust pipe that's in the front of the vehicle as well. So I got into this thing and I started it, full of fuel, everything. So I thought, well, this we must take back, you know. So eventually it was myself and Gavmont, and we had a white medic, I can't recall his name, that was with us as well. Grant Larkin. And it had quite a big back behind the driver's seat, you know, and he sat at the back where we put your weapons and that, and Gav next to me, and we were driving down the road. And this is now quite late at night, on our way back to Amoni. So we didn't have any lights, so we had to ride down this 2-lane road, you know. And we were going quite fast, and it was just moonlight, so it wasn't, you know, like bright moonlight, but you could sort of see the track. And I must have been doing about 60 k's an hour, I don't know, but we were moving. Now we want to get back there. So the road turned. There was a 90-degree turn, which I didn't see. But there was a cattle trough, concrete cattle trough, which we nailed straight in the center. And this tanker went over the cattle trough and into the ground and that, and sparks were coming out of the front of the exhaust. And a medic, he kept it. Sorry. He got out there and he ran because he thought this was going to explode. So when the sparks left, we hopped back in the vehicle and got back on the road and went back to Omoni. Eventually got there, I think we got there around about 11 o'clock.
As Peter mentioned, I mentioned in my earlier segment that I'd been chomping on the bit to let go with this French rocket launcher that I had, and unfortunately I couldn't. So we checked all the vehicles that were serviceable, and they headed off to Omoni, and then they said to me, Gavin, you can take care of the rest, which was right up my alley because I kind of developed a nickname in Omoni as Gavin Bangs, because I was always blowing shit up all over the place. So I got stuck in, and I nailed a lot of vehicles. It was a lot of fun. And I remember there was a Land Cruiser, kind of an open Land Cruiser, and I was just about to let fly, and it couldn't start, so it was on my hit list. And I was just about to let fly and nail this Land Cruiser, and someone came running. No, that's for Piet van Zyl. They said, that's for Piet van Zyl. Don't kill that thing. So they saved it just by a whisker. Anyway, the other thing Peter forgot to mention was someone had uncovered in the kitchens these huge tins of tuna. And
condensed milk.
Yeah, and condensed milk. And there we were driving back with the medic with these big tins of tuna, eating them with the newly acquired AK bayonets. And I'm lucky I didn't create another customer for the dock when Lipman drove over the cow trough. That I didn't impale myself with the damn AK bayonet. But yeah, that was a very memorable event for me.
This is not a wrap-up, but I think it encapsulates the experience that we had there, the ethos that existed between all of us, the camaraderie that existed between all of us, and the value system that we lived to. Peter and I, being at the forefront of the first escaping group of that morning, we were head on with a sizable number of people, myself, Peter, and Alberto. And it's daunting. There's no way you can get around it. That is daunting. But you're a soldier. We volunteered to be there. We were doing what we wanted to do as soldiers. So we took the task on. We stood our ground. We took them on. And when it became evident that Peter and myself and Alberto were in a bit of a spot here, without hesitation, the other groups started to come across to us and assist us. And we provided. Willem and Piet, Paolo, myself, rest in peace, did a superb job in that reconnaissance under very, very difficult circumstances. They got into the camp, and let me tell you something, you've got to have fair-sized cojones to walk into a well-established enemy camp to reconnoitre. And that's what he did. That is what Willem did and what Paolo did. They did the job they were meant to do under, as I say again, incredibly difficult circumstances. And we prevailed under incredibly difficult circumstances as a unit. As Peter mentioned, my backpack, as we called them, the Sheilas, had gone skywards at some point during the day because this attack was in late May, the 21st of May 1980, and the grass was dry already. Rain had come and gone a long time ago, it was dry grass. So I had nothing. I had no food, I had no sleeping bag, nothing. Radio, gone. So that evening we camped under a massive tree. And I know Peter tried to look for this tree when they went back in 2010. So we're under the tree now, various people are passing me bits and pieces of rat packs. There's some sleeping bags which were made out of parachute material, and I was stuffing these parachute material bags into one another. There several people have said, yes, Sam, and others, that was a cold evening, you know. It wasn't summertime, it was cold. So I was doing the best with what the guys could give me, and I was down on one knee, stuffing this bag. I hadn't had time to reflect on the day yet, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. And I looked up and it was Peter. And Peter leaned into me and he said, Fitzy, tonight you pray to God. And you're going to have to forgive me if I get a bit emotional. He said, tonight you pray to God. And you thank God for saving us. And I looked up at Peter and said, okay, Pete. And he said, I'm serious with you. You thank God tonight for saving our lives. And I left it at that. I never went into prayer. I was there. That was my choice to be there, and I accepted that one day a bullet that is marked, you may concern, may actually meet me. And that will be the end of my time on this earth. I accepted it. I never dreaded it. I accepted it. Time passed. Peter and I served for many operations after that, and with the rest of the guys as well. And years later, I attended an old boys function in the school that I went to. And I was very friendly with two brothers, the Mortar brothers. The elder one, Peter, was the same age as I was, and the younger one, Mark, was 2 years younger than I was. But Mark and I had a bond through sport. And Mark was quite a good cricket player, as was Peter. And they played club cricket together. And Peter had mentioned this incident to Mark when they realised they had me in common. So at some point during the course of the dinner, we were standing around talking to one another, and you break away into groups and chat and catch up and all that kind of thing. And Mark tapped me and said, hey Fitz, how you going? And this and that. The next thing he said, you know Peter Lippman? I said, of course, I know Peter. He said, now Peter told me about Savate. I said, yeah. I said, you know, Mark, it was quite a battle. I said, but Fitz, he said it was more than just quite a battle. He said, the two of you got pretty close to losing your lives. I said, yeah, Mark, it was pretty close to some stages, you know. We had a bit of a talk about it, and he said, listen, when you see Peter next time, give him my best regards and all that kind of stuff. On the drive home that night, you know, you talk about delayed reaction. Guys, this is easy 15 years later. Easy, sometime in the 90s. I guess, you know, I don't know when you last played cricket with Mark, but... And, you know, it hit me. How fortunate we had been that day. You know, we're not promised life. Life is not promised to us. It's not guaranteed. And yet, here we all sit. 43 years on from that battle. Able to enjoy one another, camaraderie, renew our friendships, reminisce. This privilege was not given to those that remained behind at Savate. Because where their blood falls, that is where their soul is. The guys, I'm exceptionally grateful, let me tell you something. Exceptionally grateful to be able to spend this time with you guys. I honestly am. I look at your faces and I see us in our youth. Fantastic time that we had. The sense of purpose we had. The meaning that life gave to us. I look to Willem. I see the leadership that he gave us. I'm exceptionally grateful for that, guys. And I want to thank each and every one of you for having been a part of my life. Thank you.
I just want to end off on a more happier ending than Fritzie mentioned now. But I sincerely agree with Fritzie. It was a privilege to work with all these great men. And but anyway, going back to Savate on our way out, Gavin and I were in the tanker, and we were right at the end of the convoy. All the trucks going back. In front of us was a gas truck, and Fritzie and the late Gavin Feenstra was in the truck in front of us. And Gavin was driving, and Fritzie was leaning against the door of this gas truck. And we went around a corner, and geez, like, as we were going around the corner, we just saw a big dust cloud here, like, on the side here. So we looked, what's going on here? And yeah, out of this dust is Fritzie picking himself off in the sand and everything. And needless to say, we really enjoyed that. Fritzie didn't think it was such clever, but anyway, we enjoyed it. So, yeah, that was the end of Savate for us.
Good morning. My guest today is Johan Mertz, who was an Alouette pilot during Operation Savate, and he's going to give us some information about his role in Savate. Good morning and welcome, Johan.
Morning. Thank you very much. Is it okay if I continue in Afrikaans?
That's fine. That's fine.
I might switch over to English here and there as well. Ek het gedink het sal beste wees dat ek begin met die volgorde van gebeure. Nou, ek was in daai tyd die Alouette vlieënier op Rundu, wat ek dink 95 taktiese vliegeenheid, TIU, Tactical Air Unit 95, met Major Deadliest was die OC. My boordtechnicus was Boertjie Becker, en dan die Puma bemanning op daai stadium was Teens Meyer en Zieg Hoebel, met 'n koue medevlieënier wat net toere gedoen het. En die Cessna vlieënier wat ook 'n rol gespeel het daar was Graham Chisholm, rus in vrede, hy is intussen oorlede, natuurlike oorsake. Goed, nou, soos ek het in my vlieglogboek, hierdie is die, as ek het so kan hou, dis ons Suid-Afrikaanse vlieglogboek, en ek het hierso aangeteken op 18 Mei het ek Mauni toegevlieg met Alouette 110. Nou toevallig sien julle hierdie stuk papier hierso, met al die handtekeninge van die ouens wat ek kon kry, soos Rick Lob, Echo Victor, hier's 'n Golf November, hier's Lipman en Sam Heap en so aan. En dit gaan ek plak in hierdie logboek, want dit is vir my van groot waarde. Nou, ons het absoluut niks geweet van hierdie operasie nie, ons vlieëniers nie, net Des Lynch, die bevelvoerder, hy was deel van die beplanning komitee. En hierdie inligting, baie inligting het ek nou gisterand weer uit hierdie boek gekry, Battle of Savate, geskryf deur Piet, wat ek dink 'n uitstekende boek is, en 'n mens kan hom oor en oor lees, om te sien wat aangegaan het. Nou, ek kan nie presies onthou hoe lank voor die tyd ons daar aangekom het, net die oggend nie, of ons het oorgeslaap daar, kan nie presies onthou nie, maar ek weet, op die oggend van die 21ste, het ons op Mauni gewees, toe is ons eers voorgelig wat aangaan, met ons lugbemanning. Ek kan nog onthou, ons staan en kyk hoe 'n brief, Dion Ferreira, wat as Falcon was sy naam gewees, gevegsnaam, met 'n sandmodel daar, so het hy vir die ouens voorgelig hoe gaan hulle doen. Hoe weet ek nou op daai stadium is daar wag hulle op terugvoer van Willem Ratte en sy verkenningsspanne oor die sterkte van die basis. Nou, ek dink op hierdie stadium moet ek miskien sommer sê waar die tipiese foute ingeslyp het van 'n militêre operasie. Want eerstens was daar nie genoeg inligting nie. Daar's verskeie redes daarvoor. Die een van die groot, hulle het Impalas gestuur 'n dag of 2 voor die tyd om hulle foto's te neem van die kamp en dan het hulle dit wat noem hulle dit interpreteerder het hierdie goed geïnterpreteerde lugmag inligting ou en gesê wat hy hoeveel mense hy daar dink hulle daar is, maar hulle kon nie eintlik baie sien nie. En dit is 'n groot probleem wat ons gevind het met die vegtergemeenskap, ons helikopterouens. Ons het altyd gesê they fly too high, they fly too fast for anyone to see. En hulle kan ook boggerel sien as hulle so hoog en vinnig vlieg. En dan probeer hulle vertel wat aangaan op die grond. Maar in elk geval, so en hulle het by die aanloopbaan het hulle gesien daar waar die 14,7 lugafweerkanon was, het hulle gesê dit is 'n voertuigpark wat hulle gedink het. So daar het al klaar, hulle het nie eers besef daar is lugafweer by hierdie basis nie. Soos hulle al baie keer vir ons gesê het, die inligting mense as ons in 'n geveg gaan, nee, daar's nie eens lugafweer nie. Dan kom jy daar en dan skiet hulle die wit waks uit jou uit. In elk geval, so dit was een van die foute wat hulle gemaak het. En dan die ander ene was die, blykbaar was daar inligting gekry weer onderskeppings en so aan. En dit was ook nie baie betroubaar nie. En toe, ek dink as Willem Ratte hulle se verkenning goed afgeloop het, sou hierdie ding heeltemal anders uitgedraai het. Maar omdat hulle ook mislei was deur hulle gids en op verkeerde plek afgelaai is, het dit ons nou so uitgewerk, dat hulle, toe Willem Ratte hulle agterkom, dat hier is baie meer mense en soldate en uitrusting en is wat hulle gedink het, toe is sy radio koms die daar met Dion Ferreira nie, met Velken. En om hom te waarsku nie. Met die gevolg is dat hulle toe besluit het, Dion Ferreira, hulle gaan maar aanval. Hulle wou eers hulle aangeval het, maar hulle het eventueel, lyk het my eers aangeval nadat hulle koms gestig het. Ek en Victor was in die 6 nou saam met Graham Chisholm, het hulle VHF koms gekry met Willem Ratte en toe hy sê, hy is nie gelukkig met die inligting wat hy het nog nie, is dit klaar te laat en die aanval het begin. So, toe het hierdie aanval nou voortgegaan en ons het daar gestaan op die Moni. Ons was net veronderstel, die lugmag mag nie deelgeneem het nie, want dit is UNITA wat nou veronderstel was om die kamp aan te val. Maar die UNITA het nie noue lugsteen in terme van helikopters en so nie. So ons was net daar vir 'n uiterste noodgeval. En so gebeur dit toe, want as wat volgens eerste plek, volgens ons lugmagdoktrine, mag daar nooit minder as een gunship, ten minste 2 gunships oor die kaaplyn gaan as jy in 'n kontak betrokke raak. So dit was een van die gebreke gewees, maar dit was nooit so beplan dat ons sou betrokke wees. In elk geval, toe is daar ouens wat gewond is en Dion Ferreira vra toe vir Major Lynch wat die lugmag bevelvoerder is, of ons asseblief die ouens per helikopter kan afvoer. Toe is ek en teens my die Puma getaak. Dis ergens suidwes van die basis gewees, soos ver ek kan onthou. Het hulle gesê is die LZ. Ek het toe gegaan en die plek, ek moes die LZ beveilig vir die Puma, want hy is mos nie bewapen nie. En Daar's toe redelik op ons geskiet. Jy kan dit lees in die boek wat daar gebeur het. Maar en ek dink as daar RPG-7 is op my geskiet, maar hy is hier onder die helikopter deur. Maar nietemin het ek vir Keens Meyer ingepraat, hy het geland, hulle het die casualties opgetel en ons het onttrek. Toe gaan ons terug na Maudi toe en hulle het die gewondes afgevoer, eers na die siekeboeg op Maudi, dink ek, en later Rundu toe. So het gaan die geveg voort en toe kom het aan die lig dat daar van ons soldate 'n paar is weg, is vermis. Hulle weet nie waar die ouens nie. Nou, wat nou gebeur het, toe lyk dit my, is toe die FAPLA sien, die Alouette en die Puma sien, het hulle besef, dit is nie UNITA wat hulle aanval nie, dit is die 3 Battalion of die Suid-Afrikaners. En hulle het dit huislik besluit toe, gelukkig besluit om te onttrek, noord te onttrek. Want hulle het geweet, die boere verloor nie gevegte nie. So hulle het op hulle voertuie geklim en begin noordwaarts langs die rivier langs ry. So het hulle toe nou nog nie die mense, die dooies en veral die wit soldate was hulle bekommernis, want as hierdie ouens van hulle wit soldate gevangenes geneem het en of lyke gehad het, en hulle kom in Luanda uit met hierdie mense, en dan was daar groot politieke implikasies gewees. So het Deon Ferreira weer vir lugmagsteun gevra en hulle het gevra vir die Gunship om die konvooi van FAPLA te vertraag, om vir die 3 Battalion kans te gee om terug te kom by hulle voertuie en hierdie ons agterna te sit en te stop ten alle koste. Toe het dit gekom dat ek toe gevra is om hierdie konvooi te stop. Ek en my ingenieur Boertjie Becker het toe gegaan en ek het toe besluit om bietjie hoër as normaalweg het ons op 600 na 800 voet die vyand aangevat. Maar want dan is die 20 mm kanon op sy die meeste effektiefste en jy is redelik veilig teen kleingeweervuur. Maar nietemin ek het toe ek die omvang van hierdie konvooi sien, het ek besluit om bietjie hoër te klim sodat die kleingeweervuur gevaar geminimaal is, maar in gehoop hulle gaan nie hulle lugafweerkanonne as hulle dit saamgevat het gebruik op ons nie. Want eerstens is nie gewens, as jy 2 is, dan split jy die aandag. As jy 1 is, dan is al die aandag op jou. Daarom het ek vir die ouens gevra, wil vir my sê, as ek geweervuur trek. En toe het hulle, toe daar oor hulle gaan, sê hulle, nee, jy het gesê in die boek, dit klink soos 'n papier wat uit 'n boek geskeur word, soos hulle geskiet het. En maar ons het toe op die voorkant van die konvooi se voertuie geskiet en gelukkig het dit gewerk, want hulle dadelik gestop, van die voertuie afgeklim en die bissies die riete langs die rivier in gaan wegtrek. En dan het ek, omdat ek hulle nou gestop het, wat my opdrag was om te doen, het ek dan bietjie noord gaan sirkel, om hulle te ontmoedig om nou verder te ry. Maar sodra ons bietjie weggaan, dan klim hulle weer op die voertuie en dan begin hulle weer ry. En dan begin ons nou weer skiet op hulle. Dan klim hulle weer af en dan gaan hulle in die riete in. En so, ek kan nie presies onthou hoeveel keer het hierdie patroon omgevolg nie. En op 'n stadium, toe ons oor hulle vlieg, toe word die vliegtuig nou die Alouette raak geskiet. Dit was die Alouette 110 gewees. Hy word toe raak geskiet deur 'n paar rondes. Ek weet nie dan nie, want dit is net tot stof en hierdie slag. En jy weet nie wat se kaliber vuur dit was nie. In elk geval. En ek was nog besig om my mind op te maak wat om my volgende te doen. Toe hoor ek tussen die 3 Battalion by hulle voertuig gekom en hulle is besig om hierdie konvooi aan te vat. Ek het toe gesê, nee, ek gaan herbunker, brandstof ingooi en kyk wat is die omvang van die skade. As dit nodig is, gaan ek teruggaan om hulle nou 'n ligsteen te gee. Nou by Amoni gekom, het ons gevind dat hulle het die konvooi gestop en daar was 'n duckshoot gewees en alles wat daarmee gepaard gegaan het en die ouens wat Echo Victor en Grandchism en die Cessna het hy toe bevel en beheer het die Cessna gedoen en hierdie geveg toe daar gelei wat daar gebeur het. En hulle het toe baie van die vyand gedood en van die ouens het in die rivier gespring om weg te kom van 3 Battalion toe die krokodille hulle 'n bietjie getand en so aan. In elk geval, so ek het nie weer betrokke geraak by daardie deel van die geveg nie en is toe die aand terug Roene toe. So dit was my deel van die geveg. Nou wat ek ook hierso geskryf het, as nie dit was ons na die tyd was daar ons nou groot marankas gewees, moeilikheid oor die besluit of die geveg gemagtig was of nie, wat onmiddellik wil windhoek te weet wat gaan aan en daar soveel verliese was en so aan. En dit was vir my ongelooflik toe ek lees die foute wat gemaak was. Eerstens was dit die gebrekkige verkenning soos ek gesê het. Dit was tipies wat gebeur in militêre operasies. Die komsprobleme wat daar was en dan die feit dat ons die mense nie geweet het wat die sterkte van hierdie ouens was nie. En my vraag is net as al hierdie dinge bekend was, as hulle presies geweet het, as Willem Ratte se Recce goed afgeloop het en hy het gesien hoeveel mense daar was, dan sou hulle 10 keer herbeplan het of whatever, maar dis is nou mosterd na die maal, sê hindsight is an exact science. Maar anyway, nou wat ek ook wil sê is die vraag van die politici toe van die generaals natuurlik nou wat moes antwoord aan die politici was dat hulle het gesê die geveg was nooit gemagtig nie. Nou sien ek daar het so 'n simpel fout gemaak waar in die sein gevra was magtiging vir verkenning gevolg deur 'n aanval. En die antwoord kom terug, gaan voort met die werk. Nou, eerstens dat woord werk word nie eintlik gebruik in militêre operasies nie, maar toe daar in die boek staan, dat die ou wat die sein geskryf het, die mense wat die sein teruggeskryf het, die hoogsgeheime sein, uiters geheime sein, het geskryf, gaan voort met die verkenning afgekort VERK, en jy mag nie verkenning of afkortings in 'n uiters geheime sein gebruik nie. En die arme ou wat die sein moes stuur, het gedink dis 'n spelfout, die V moet 'n W wees, so gaan voort met die werk. Maar ek bedoel, sulke simpel foute het veroorsaak dat daar onnodig nou mense, of nie onnodig nie, maar ongelukkig nou mense doodgegaan het. Maar hierdie dinge gebeur in oorlogvoering. Soos hulle sê, shit happens, en ek dink die generaals en van die politici het die ouens onder die bus gegooi. Nou, wat ek ook nou, wat nie miskien bekend is nie, maar wat ek van weet, is die gebeure in die siekeboeg op Roende intussen, want ek weet dit wat my vrou, want ek was mos permanent daar, my vrou was 'n suster in die siekeboeg op Roende. En sy vertel toe daai eerste bodybags en casadags daar by die siekeboeg inkom, dus daar natuurlik chaos gewees. Almal wil weet wat aangaan. En toe het sy is die senior suster gewees en hulle sê toe vir haar, sy moet wegbly van die pasiënte af en die liggame af, sy moet die mense, die naastebestaandes gaan kalm hou. En sy kon dit nie verstaan nie, maar hoekom hulle dit gedoen het, die boodskap het so vinnig by Roende uitgekom dat die helikopter raak geskiet is, dat die boodskap wat toe daar uitgekom het is, dat die helikopter afgeskiet is. So hulle was bang, ek lê in een van hierdie body bags as hulle dit oopmaak. Daarom het hulle al weggestuur om te gaan help met die ander pasiënte. Maar in elk geval, so dit was daar een van die dinge, ja, die medics en Bouwer en daai ouens het fantastiese goeie werk gedoen. Wat ek wil net 'n paar punte uitlig oor. Ek het hier in die boek een sinnetjie gelees wat baie in die nabetragting, consolidation, wat vir my nogal iets beteken het en ek wil graag iets daaroor sê. Dis nou Mauzi wat hierso gepraat het. Dis nou die aand wat hy in Leon Ferreira Falcon gepraat het. It was also in this bivouac that this is not hearsay, that Dion admitted to me just what a close run action it had been. He told me that his mortars had used up all their ammunition except for a handful of bombs, including the ammunition set aside for use in the event of an counter-attack. He agreed with me that the appearance over the battlefield of the helicopter had been the turning point in the battle. Nou, hulle sê as jy militêre geskiedenis leer, daar's by enige groot geveg is daar 'n draaipunt, aan die tyd. En dis wat hulle gereken het. Maar dit wys jy nou net is nie omdat ons so goed is of wat ook al nie, maar laat so 'n klein dingetjie soos een alhoewel Gunship kan nie so 'n rol speel op die vyand se gemoed en motivering dat dit hulle aangemoedig het om op hulle voertuig om te onttrek het die geveg het. Anders sou daar 10 keer nog baie meer ongevalle gewees het. Nou, wat vir my tragies is, 'n paar dinge wat ek in die boek ook gelees het, wat vir my tragies is dat omdat dit 'n politieke besluit was, is 3-2 Battalion nooit toegelaat om Savate se veldslag geveg op hulle vaandel te sit nie. Dit is tragies. Ook is dit tragies dat daar nie verering aan gegee is aan 3-2 Battalion in terme van medaljes en dekorasies nie. Maar en dit is natuurlik alles te wyte aan die feit dat die mense, die seniors, die generaals en die politici almal hulle hande was om nie aanspreeklikheid te aanvaar vir wat gebeur het nie. Nou, wil ek ook net 'n saakie hierso aanspreek en noem ek dink ek is die enigste ou wat vereer is in hierdie Savate geveg en ek is eintlik nie eintlik, daar's ouens wat baie meer as ek gedoen het en ek wil net verduidelik hoe dit gebeur het. Die rede hoekom ek HC ontvang het is dat hier in 1989 was ek op daai stadium, dit is nou 9 jaar later, né? Ek het intussen nog niks weer van Savate gehoor nie, ek het niks geweet van die reunies wat gehou is en wat ook al. Was ek die bevelvoerder van 31 geskader op Hoedspruit, Pumas en Alouettes. En ons het jaarliks 'n helikopterkonferensie gehad. En daai jaar was die konferensie in Bloemfontein. En toe op een van die besprekingspunte was die erkenning gee aan mense vir wat hulle gedoen het in die oorlog. Want kyk, dit was nou naby aan die einde van die oorlog in Suidwes. Toe het en wat nou die aanleiding daartoe gegee is dat die wat ons noem die Jetsons, die Mirage en Impala vlieëniers, veral die Mirage vlieëniers het nou dan betrokke gewees in die oorlog. En op daai stadium het hulle vir een operasie wat hulle gedoen het. Die hele klomp van hulle het SM medaljes, Suiderkruismedaljes ontvang. En dit het die chopper ouens 'n bietjie dwars in die krop gesteek. En toe is ons opdrag gegee, ons skadebevelvoerders om terug te gaan eskaders toe en vir almal op die eskader te vra om te skryf hoeveel bostoere hulle gedoen het, by hoeveel operasies hulle betrokke was en dan ook insidente beskryf oor wat gebeur het. En al die ouens op my skader wat ek kan onthou, het ek die goed aangestuur en ek het ook my storie geskryf en uiteraard die insident wat ek die beste kan onthou was Savate geweest. Ek het geskryf soos ek nou vertel het wat daar gebeur het en dit aangestuur na die basisbevelvoerder toe en ek het daarvan vergeet. En toe ek die volgende jaar klaar was in die stafkursus, kry ek 'n sein dat ek met 'n HC vereer is. So dit is hoekom dit gebeur het, maar ek voel, dis nie net daar 3 Battalion nie, maar van daai lugbemanning wat daar opgetree het, moet ook erkenning ontvang het. Maar ek weet nie of daar, dis is nou 'n bietjie moster na die maal, dit moes gebeur het, maar dit het nie gebeur, volgens my opinie. So ja, dit is eintlik my storie wat ek het. Ek weet nie of daar enige vrae is nie.
Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive notifications.